Right, we start with oral questions. The Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, Richard Ford.
Number one, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and a Happy New Year to you and to colleagues across the House. I've temporarily lost the hearing in one of my ears, so if I'm shouting or I don't hear every detail of the questions, I apologise in advance. Mr. Speaker, this government is determined to strengthen our energy security by moving away from volatile fossil fuels and delivering a clean power system. We've switched off the last coal power station in the UK and have consented enough clean power to power the equivalent of 7.5 million homes. That is how we will tackle the climate crisis, strengthen our energy security and create good jobs across the country.
The International Renewable Energy Agency reports that in 2024, China installed 5 times more renewable power than Europe and 8 times more renewable power than the United States. And in the same year, for the UK, more than 2/3 of our liquid natural gas came from the United States. So in the difficult geopolitical situation that we find ourselves in, how is the government making the UK more self-sufficient for our energy supply?
Well, it's a hugely important question. In an increasingly uncertain world, our energy security becomes more and more important, and that's why we're determined not only that we build a clean power system to tackle the most existential crisis the planet faces in the climate crisis, but also so that this is homegrown power here in the UK that we control. That's hugely important. So every step that we're taking to invest in renewable energy, to invest in a new generation of nuclear, helps us to do that. But it's also, of course, the economic opportunity of the century, which delivers our energy security and jobs at the same time.
Chair of the Select Committee, Bill Esterson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Happy New Year. And I hope that the Minister, in his New Year's resolutions, will commit to building the case for the energy transition through the lower consumer bills, the secure jobs, the public health improvement through reduced emissions, and indeed through energy security. But does he agree that those who oppose climate action are denying our children and grandchildren a future? And will he endeavour to make the case also to fight against the misinformation, the disinformation, the outright myths peddled by some of those opposite?
Well, typically my honourable friend is right on these points, and yes, it is one of my New Year's resolutions, and I suspect my ministerial colleagues as well, for us to redouble our efforts to make the case for this. And indeed, just this morning, I was reading about yet another study that shows that we underestimate the level of support in the general public for climate action. And we have to remember that while there's a lot of noise around this at the moment, the reality is the public back action on the climate, and it is the right thing to do, not just for future generations, as my honourable friend rightly says, but actually for our energy security and for good jobs as well.
Dave Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Refined hydrocarbon fuels are excluded from the government's carbon border adjustment mechanism, meaning that while UK refineries face energy ETS costs of £50 per tonne, overseas producers of fuels do not. This is clearly incomprehensibly damaging in economic terms and is self-evidently counterproductive in climate goals. And in terms of energy security, it's pure madness. Refining at Grangemouth and Prax Lindsay are 2 early casualties of Labour's failure to understand basic economics. So will the government now act to protect the 4 remaining refineries on GB, or will Labour continue with their policy of deindustrialisation dressed up as decarbonisation?
Minister.
Well, I'd say a happy new year to the honourable gentleman and his sunny disposition back in this House again. First of all, let me say that we committed in the budget to looking at the CBAM inclusion, and we're working to make that happen. Second of all, of course, I've been working with all the refineries to make sure that they are as sustainable as possible. And thirdly, I think he has an absolute cheek to come here and talk about deindustrialisation when his party has failed to have an industrial strategy in Scotland for the 18 years they've been in power, and they published just before Christmas the flimsiest of flimsy plans for energy security in Scotland, which was mostly made up by pictures and not by any detail. They have absolutely no credibility on these issues whatsoever.
Chair of the Environmental Audit, Toby Perkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There are many corporate customers who are keen to decarbonise but find that grid connection forecasts of 5 and more years stand in their way. So can the Minister tell us what he's doing to speed up business connections to the grid, and also what he's doing to make sure we prioritise those business customers who are going to make biggest difference in decarbonising?
Minister.
My honourable friend raises a hugely important point, and the future of the grid is going to be absolutely critical to not only how we get clean power to homes and businesses across the country to bring down bills, but actually how we deliver the economic growth the country needs as well. That's why we've taken two key actions. First of all, to build the grid that we need for the future, opposed by some of those opposite us. That future grid is critical for us to build. But secondly, also clearing out the connections queue so that there is space in the connections queue for more projects like the ones that he mentions to join. Both of these actions are absolutely critical, and those who oppose the building of new grid infrastructure oppose the exact economic opportunities my honourable friend just mentioned.
Richard Tice.
Mr. Speaker, could the Minister explain why the government has rejected a higher bid for the Lindsay oil refinery that would have kept jobs open, kept the refinery open, attracted more investment in favour of a lower bid that is destroying jobs, mothballing the refinery, and is against the growth interest that the government professes? And could he confirm whether or not the taxpayer is retaining the decommissioning liabilities of the oil refinery?
Minister.
Well, firstly, on a positive note in the new year, I think the honourable gentleman had some good news over Christmas, and I congratulate him on that. But he's quite wrong on his actual question. And look, first of all, I should set out, as I did in my oral statement on the Lindsay oil refinery, that this was an insolvency process, and therefore for the official receiver to conclude the sales process. They have done that. They have taken the highest bid that was on the table, and now P66 will take forward in a sustainable way the future of that site, and I'll continue to work with them on that question. On the question about decommissioning liabilities, no, the government does not retain those decommissioning liabilities. They were part of the deal, and P66 will take those along with the site.
Dr. Jeevan Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Happy New Year. We're facing an affordability crisis in this country, indeed across high-income nations, because of our dependence on fossil fuels. That's why energy prices here rose by 40% since 2021. It's what our constituents feel. It's damaging our country, but more importantly, it's also damaging the faith that people across this nation have in our democracy to deliver for them. So can the Minister set out how our transition to fossil fuels will help to resolve the affordability crisis and indeed restore faith in this place?
Minister.
Well, it's an important question on two fronts. He rightly mentions that the transition away from fossil fuels is hugely important for our energy security and for future generations. And we in this place, I think, have a huge responsibility to safeguard the future of our planet for those generations still to come. But the second point he makes is that we also rightly need to make the case for why this is important now. It's the way we get off the volatility of fossil fuel prices that so many of our constituents are still paying the price for. And it's also the way that we industrialise communities right across the country. So the tens of thousands of jobs that have been created through the renewables that are already in place, but the hundreds of thousands of jobs that we want to see by building much more of this infrastructure in the UK is how we get an economic advantage as well as the energy security.
Harriet Cross, Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the Future of the North Sea consultation paper, the government defined windfall prices as $90 a barrel for oil and 90 pence a therm for gas. Can the Minister tell me the price of oil and gas today?
Minister.
Well, we've been really clear that the Energy Profits Levy comes to an end in 2030. We've put in place what the future of that scheme looks like to give certainty for the long-term future. And of course, the Energy Profits Levy was introduced by her party in government. And so we've been really clear that the Energy Profits Levy will come to an end in 2030 unless the price floor is triggered in the meantime. But her party also have to say, if they are in favour of scrapping it today, where will the billions of pounds that come from that levy come from in order to fund the public services that our constituents rely on?
Harriet Cross.
Mr. Speaker, either the Minister doesn't know the current price or he doesn't want to tell us. Oil today is $62 a barrel and gas 72 pence a therm, up to a third lower than what the government itself defines as windfall prices. But despite this, they're still punishing our oil and gas industry with massive windfall taxes. And the cost? 1,000 jobs lost every month, production set to halve in the next 4 years, and almost complete dependence on foreign imports of oil and gas by 2030. Mr. Speaker, this government is going to be responsible for the death of one of our most most important industries. So will the government now end the oil and gas super tax, scrap the mad ban on new licences and finally back the North Sea?
Minister.
Well, I think there are a number of areas there that I would challenge. First of all, the level was set by her party in government, and we haven't changed that. The floor was set by the Conservative Party. Second of all, she talks about thousands of jobs lost every month. I think, look, that is an important study that was done by a university. It is not a reflection of what has actually happened in the last few months. So although I absolutely take seriously modelling like this, I think we do need to base it in the reality of what has actually happened. And every single job that's lost is, of course, hugely distressing for those communities, but she should also talk up the opportunities in the North Sea, because she says that we're talking down the North Sea. In fact, it's her party that repeatedly talks down the opportunities that can happen in the future of the North Sea, in carbon capture and storage, in hydrogen, in decommissioning work in oil and gas, and much, much more. She should talk those up and be ambitious for the future of the North Sea, not talk it down.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Happy New Year and Happy Epiphany. I and my right honourable friends, the Energy and the Business Secretaries, are committed to slashing energy costs for British businesses. From April, eligible energy-intensive industries will see an uplift in compensation for electricity network charges, with 90% of costs being covered. We're also consulting on a British industrial competitiveness scheme, which includes our plan to exempt over 7,000 businesses from covering the costs of some of the historic renewables levies.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Mr. Speaker, small and medium-sized businesses are the absolute lifeblood of our economy, and many of them, like the amazing Bar Lento, which is a Spanish cafe in Winchester, I spend a lot of time in it, are actually the sort of beating hearts of our communities as well. Mr. Speaker, small businesses, their average electricity bill is now £240 a month. 92% of these businesses say they're going to increase prices to deal with energy volatility. And unlike households, Mr. Speaker, businesses don't face an energy price cap, and so they are effectively dealing with energy volatility all the time. Does the Minister agree with me that this is failing small businesses, and will he commit to reviewing how we end this wild west of energy regulation?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank him for his question. He points to the issue of energy volatility, and hopefully it was clear from my answer that the government is not satisfied with the position as it is. And of course, this energy volatility has been caused historically by our reliance on oil and gas and on petrostates and dictators. Clearly a policy that the opposition wish to return to, and it is this government's clean power policy, clean power mission, that will ensure that we have energy security for the future. And unlike the climate-denying policies of the Conservatives and Reform, which will destroy jobs and investment in this country, we will deliver energy security and green energy for our small and large businesses and domestic consumers.
Rachel Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure that many schools have returned this week to cold classrooms, and that's why I'm delighted that Kingsbury School, St Michael's C.A.V. Academy in Bedworth, All Saints Bedworth C.A.V. Academy and Ash Green School have all received funding to install solar panels. Can the Minister outline what support these schools will receive to install the panels and how this will help our schools cut their energy bills?
It's kind of like education. Can you look into business, Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But I think it shows how committed this government is to supporting reducing costs across all of our services, including education and health, with the installation of solar panels. And we saw last year a massive increase in solar installations in the UK, equivalent to enough energy generation to power 2 million homes. So a benefit not only for our domestic consumers and, of course, green energy as well with these solar installations, but also ensuring that by installing solar on rooftops, such as in schools and hospitals, we're taking maximum advantage. Thank you.
Collins.
Mr. Speaker. Happy New Year, Mr. Speaker. And with your permission, I'll answer 3 and 19 together. The 2023 Generation Costs Report, published under the last government, shows the levelised cost of electricity to build and operate a new gas-fired power station to be significantly higher than the cost of onshore wind, solar and offshore wind in the most recent renewables auction round. Renewables are a cheaper technology to build and operate than new gas-fired power stations.
Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. NESO's Clean Power 2030 plan relies on unabated gas power stations without a clear plan for their decarbonisation after 2030. The forthcoming hydrogen strategy presents a natural opportunity to set long-term goals for the wider integrated energy system, including hydrogen-fired CCGT generation and long-term salt carbon energy storage at scale. Will that strategy include a quantified pathway with delivery milestones for transitioning dispatchable power dispatchable power capacity, and will NESO be required to incorporate this pathway into its planning?
Well, my honourable friend asked a really important question, Mr. Speaker. And if he looks at our 2030 Clean Power Plan, we precisely talk about the importance of low-carbon dispatchable power as a way forward. And I'm really proud of what is happening with our CCS plans, a net zero Teesside, and additionally, as he says, it'll be an important part of our forthcoming hydrogen strategy.
Affordability.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Current global instability from Ukraine to Venezuela has shown the vital importance of having domestic energy security. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that investing in renewables will help both with security and cost, particularly because they are cheaper to build and operate, as well as providing us with that vital energy security in an uncertain world?
My honourable friend is right. The figures that came out from NESO over Christmas showed that we have got extra renewable power in 2025 equivalent to powering 2 million homes. That's 2 million homes which will not be powered by imported gas. And that gives us the price stability that they never had under the previous government. And this fundamental lesson at a time of geopolitical instability is homegrown, clean power is what gives us the certainty we need.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to government figures, output from new solar projects costs around £41 per megawatt hour compared to roughly £114 per megawatt hour of the lifespan cost of new gas power. I know the Secretary of State agrees with me and Renew that clean energy remains the lowest cost of energy, but how do we make sure that the British public agrees with us too?
Well, I think the Honourable Lady just did a good job of highlighting the importance of this, and she gets to the crucial point, Mr. Speaker, which is those parties opposite that reject solar, that reject onshore wind, that reject offshore wind, they are rejecting cheap, clean.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his answers? Not only is it important to have the cost factor when it comes to looking at the gas-fired power stations, it's also important to ensure that communities have an input into the planning process. Can I ask the Minister, has that been central to the formation of any gas-fired power station policy, and has the Minister had the opportunity to share those thoughts and information with the Northern Ireland Assembly, who wish to look at the possibilities for them in Northern Ireland as well? Thank you.
We obviously have regular discussion with the Northern Ireland Assembly on a range of, an executive on a range of issues, Mr. Speaker. Look, on his point about nationally significant projects, of course it's absolutely right that communities have input into these questions. And certainly in the case of homegrown low-carbon power, we also want communities to see the benefit, because by hosting infrastructure, including low-carbon infrastructure, communities are doing a service to the country.
Yes. Shadow Secretary of State, Clerkety.
Thank you, and Happy New Year, Mr. Speaker. This is just nonsense on stilts from the Secretary of State, and we know this because the biggest AI company in the world has said that they will need gas power to succeed in Britain. So if a company wants to build its own gas plant here at no cost to the British taxpayer, the warped green ideology of this Secretary of State, who's obsessed with domestic emissions above everything else, would block them. Those emissions will still exist, that company will start somewhere, just not here in Britain. So does the Secretary of State agree that as a completely mad reason to block the growth we need in Britain?
I don't really understand what the question was really about, but we're in favour of AI, and we're working with our colleagues on AI. But I have to say, I'm glad she got up on this question, because she's been rumbled by the figures I produced, Mr. Speaker, because they came out when she was the Energy Secretary. She goes round saying how much more expensive renewable power is. Actually, the figures that she produced shows that renewable power is cheaper to build and operate than gas-fired power stations. And she used to believe it until she jumped on the latest passing bandwagon, which is suddenly to be a net zero sceptic.
Philip Van Belder.
Question number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Energy resilience is one of my top priorities as Energy Minister, and I understand the particular challenge in rural communities which do see more frequent power disruption. We work with industry and with Ofgem to ensure that sufficient investment is made into the rural power networks, but also that support is provided when power cuts do occur. And I also want to pass on my thanks to all those engineers and support staff who work in difficult circumstances to reconnect communities when power failure does occur.
With increased frequency of stormy weather as a result of climate change, the rural communities I know are sadly all too familiar with long periods without power. What is the government doing to ensure older and more vulnerable residents get the support they need during cuts? And will he commit to delivering a strategic plan to improve the resilience of rural power networks?
Minister.
Well, we do review lessons learned after every particular significant power failure, particularly after storms. So there was a significant review after Storm Arwen in 2022, but we review after every storm to look at whether there are areas we can improve. I meet regularly with the Electricity Networks Association, who do much of the work with the DNOs to make sure on welfare provisions in particular they are provided as quickly and efficiently as possible. There is much more we can do, but one of the fundamental things we have to do is invest in the future of the grid, and that does mean building grid infrastructure and improving existing grid infrastructure, and members across the House have to support that grid infrastructure if they want to see as resilient a grid as possible across the country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nazing in my constituency of Harlow is home to many rural businesses, including, as I mentioned before, Recess, the Lee Valley growers. They say to me that actually one of the biggest challenges they face is the considerable increase in cost of energy and also energy security. So can I ask the Minister how he thinks the British Industrial Competitive Scheme can support rural businesses in my constituency of Harlow, in particular the Nazing growers?
Well, I thank my honourable friend and congratulate the businesses in his constituency doing such a good job. We're absolutely determined to bring down the cost for households and businesses across the country. Schemes like the one he mentions are our commitment to doing that, but also, of course, the Chancellor announced in the budget that households right across the country will have £150 coming off their bill as the decisions that we have made as this government to tackle the cost of living crisis, but we're determined to support businesses to do the same. And, of course, the long-term way that we reduce the bills of businesses, of industry and of households right across the country is to remove gas from the system, to deliver that clean power system that helps all of us have energy security and cheaper bills.
Question 5, please.
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend the Chancellor's decision to take an average £150 of costs off people's energy bills from April is a reflection of this government's commitment to tackle the cost of living crisis. It will make a difference to families across the country and is estimated to reduce by over 1 million the number of those needing to pay more than 10% of their income in energy costs.
Whereas, Mr. Speaker, Kensir, based in my Campbell and Redruth and Hale constituency, is the largest manufacturer of ground source heat pumps to neighbourhoods and council flats, and I know the Secretary of State and the Chancellor have both visited. This technology delivers low energy bills for family finances, but the sector requires policy certainty and a plan to grow. Now, I know ministers have been very generous with their time to date, but would the Secretary of State meet with me again to discuss how we can provide that certainty and commitment to public funding supporting this technology?
Well, I really enjoyed my visit to Kensir, Mr. Speaker. I recommend all members to go. It's a really innovative company. They're leading in heat pump manufacture. And as he will know, we'll shortly be publishing our Warm Homes plan, and that will be really, really important to drive forward heat pump uptake and indeed help companies like Kensir, because there's a massive job story as well as part of this.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, socialists do have a habit of taking money from people and then asking them to be grateful for getting some of it back. So could the Secretary of State tell us how much, if one is a taxpayer, how much will the £150 reduction in fees actually cost them back?
Yeah, I'll tell her. We're really proud of the fact that in the budget we raised taxes on the wealthy so we could cut bills for millions of families across this country. And I'm so grateful to her for her question, because this illustrates the difference. This wasn't an easy thing to do. It was a decision made by this government, because for too long this country has been run for the wealthy and powerful by that party opposite. We are changing that, and we're cutting bills for millions of families across Britain.
Welcoming into the dispatch box, Shadow Minister Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government's promise to cut energy bills by £300 is dead in the water, as bills are now £190 higher than when they took office. Now their big idea is to pull the wool over the eyes of the British public by moving some of the costs of net zero from people's energy bill to their tax bill. So can the Minister answer a very simple question? After their supposed bill cut takes place in April, will the average energy bill be higher or lower than when Labour came to power?
I can tell you the bills are going to be lower, because if you look across, if he just listens, if you look across 2025 compared to 2024, energy bills are lower in real terms than they were in 2024, and the price cap is lower than in 2024, and we will be making that situation better because bills are still too high by taking £150 off bills. And I just want to highlight this point, Mr. Speaker, because they opposed every measure in my right honourable friend the Chancellor's budget. Yet they also say they want the £150 off bills. You can't have both. It's this government that is delivering on the cost of living crisis.
Well, I'm intrigued with. Question 6 has been transferred. It's even got onto the order paper. Why is it so late for a department to suddenly find out it's been transferred? I know it's good practice, and I hope it won't happen again. Steve Yam.
Number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the autumn budget, the Chancellor announced the transfer of the £2.3 billion reserve to members of the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme. Almost 40,000 former mine workers and colliery staff received their first bonus increase before Christmas, with an average uplift of £100 a week, or a one-off £5,500 lump sum for backdated pensions. That's the difference that this Labour government is making to coalfield communities.
Steve Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, on behalf of many former mine workers in my constituency who have had that pension reserve fund returned, I want to thank the Minister and his colleagues for supporting coalfield communities like mine. He will also be aware of my letter last month asking about the future sharing arrangements for scheme surpluses for both the MPS and BCSSS schemes. I wonder if the Minister could provide some clarity on how the Government intends to proceed to resolve this final outstanding injustice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend for the leadership that he's shown on this issue in the House. And I do thank him for his letter of last month. And I can inform him that I'm meeting with the trustees of the Mine Workers Pension Scheme on the 4th of February and of the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme on the 18th of February as well. The focus of both of those meetings is how we can deal with this issue of surplus sharing for the future, and I'm keen that this will be resolved as soon as possible.
Peter Lamb.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the government inherited a legacy of huge underinvestment in the grid, which piled up constraint costs and a chaotic system for grid connection, which left crucial projects facing decade-long delays. We're tackling this with a programme of investment and reform, including sweeping change to the grid connections process, which saw NESO last month set out a massive overhaul of the queue, cutting its size by 2/3 and giving priority to the generation projects we need.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his response. Despite its rural setting, Crawley's travel-to-work area is actually a larger economy than many of the UK's core cities. Despite this fact, it has been held back over recent years due to a lack of grid capacity at its major connection point with the national grid, resulting in the loss of several major investments under the last government. Could I ask the Minister could look into what could be done to upgrade this connection point and unleash that restrained economic growth?
I think my honourable friend makes a really crucial point, Mr. Speaker, that because there was this terrible backlog where we had something like 5 times as much capacity as was required in the queue and the wrong priorities in the queue, we had massive problems for demand connection too. This very significant reform that we've done, overhauling the queue, something that wasn't done for years and years, will then free up demand projects to connect, and I hope very much that projects in his constituency can benefit.
John Mill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Access to the grid for new energy suppliers is very patchy across the country, and this leads to an over-concentration of solar farm and battery energy farm applications in unexpected places, such as near the village of Cowfold in my constituency of Horsham. So what action will the government take to ensure a fair distribution of renewable energy developments?
Well, I do know from my honourable friend that he's had discussions with the honourable member, and it is important that we have those discussions with honourable members. I think one of the important things for this year, one slightly for the train spotters or the energy spotters, Mr. Speaker, is the Strategic Spatial Energy Plan, which is going to set out a pathway for where we need power in the coming years, well beyond 2030. And as part of that, we should be definitely looking at the parts of the country where the right places to put the power that we need.
Law. Question 9, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Happy New Year to you and to other honourable members. I'm proud that the Labour Government has extended the Warm Homes discount to an extra 2.7 million households, extending that total to around 6 million, unlike the party opposite who opposed that change. This is going to make a vital difference to so many families this winter, including approximately an additional 220,000 households in the South West. That's almost double the number of households that were supported year on year.
Law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I greatly welcome these cuts to bills forthcoming. And notwithstanding those potential improvements, many of my constituents in Roach, for example, live in areas that are not connected to the main gas grid and where the initial outlay associated with implementing renewable technologies can be prohibitively expensive to people. So could the scope of the Warm Homes Plan be extended so that areas rich in geological resources but exposed to fuel poverty, such as Roach, are able to benefit from geothermal heat networks and significantly reduce bills on the back of those cheap renewable sources?
Hear, hear. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know my honourable friend is not just a champion for his own constituency, but a champion for Cornwall as a whole. And in terms of the government's approach, we support the development of geothermal projects, and we particularly recognise that geothermal heat has really good potential as a low-carbon source for heat networks. And obviously, we'll be publishing the Warm Homes Plan soon, and we'll have more to say about that in the Warm Homes Plan.
Joshua Reynolds.
Mr. Speaker, Citizens Advice note that the Warm Homes discount has not kept pace with rising energy bills and will struggle to touch the sides for families in energy debt. So will the Minister commit to the Government reviewing whether the £150 Warm Homes discount provides sufficient support for families who really need it right now?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government is absolutely gripped by getting energy bills down, and that's why in April we're taking £150 off the costs of energy for everyone across the country, and why this year we extended the Warm Homes discount to 6 million households, almost doubling that across the country, and will continue to take action to reduce bills for people across our country.
Josh Babrin.
Question number 10,
Mr. Speaker.
Happy New Year, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. DESNES works very closely with the MHCLG. Support for councils to deliver net zero includes the local net zero hubs, like the Greater South East Net Zero Hub that covers the Eastbourne constituency, and Great British Energy, enabling councils and communities to build a pipeline of local clean energy projects, bringing growth and attracting commercial investment.
Josh Babrin.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister too. Eastbournians without driveways like Lauren on Winchcombe Road are committed to getting an electric vehicle to reduce their emissions, but they're being let down by Conservative-run East Sussex County Council that has failed to invest in pavement gullies to allow safe electric vehicle charging cross-street. So will the Minister urge East Sussex County Council and her colleagues at MHCLG to do so, to follow the lead of Lib Dem-run Oxfordshire Council and pilot a cross-pavement electric vehicle charging scheme?
Minister.
Well, I thank you for your question. Local councils do play an absolutely pivotal role. I work very closely with the local Net Zero Delivery Group and UK 100, and I've been very fortunate to visit Leeds and Sheffield Labour-run councils to see the excellent local work they have been doing to support net zero. I think he raises an excellent point on ensuring that councils support local people to deliver on what they want to do and have the EV infrastructure, and I think it sounds like there's some good leadership opportunities to learn from other councils.
Anna Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and a Happy New Year. In addition to those mentioned by the Minister, I hope she'll join me in commending Bradford Council for its ambitious Climate Action Plan 2025 to 2028, which sets out a pathway to net zero for the Bradford district, with really innovative projects in there, such as the district heat network, the new investment in a low-carbon hydrogen industry, creating fantastic jobs, and a massive conversion of street lighting to LED. So will she agree with me that other councils should learn from places like Bradford in how to get to a pathway to net zero?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her excellent question and for her championing of Bradford Council and of her constituency. District heat is a massive opportunity, and I've seen that firsthand for myself in Sheffield and in Leeds, but also, as the Secretary of State was referring to, in Cornwall. They've got some excellent projects. I think it's great to see Bradford Council leading the way. As I mentioned in my earlier question, UK 100 and the councils across the country are really at the cutting edge of leading our transition, and it's great to learn from them.
Thank you, Shanker.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tackling fuel poverty is a priority for this government. We will publish a new fuel poverty strategy for England to ensure that many more fuel-poor households are protected by 2030, and that will be at the same time as the Warm Homes Plan. We've also expanded the Warm Home discount to nearly 6 million households, adding an approximate 2.7 million additional households to the scheme.
Shanker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everyone deserves a warm and safe place to call home. But for 20% of families in Derby South who live in fuel poverty, this week's cold snap is a nightmare as they struggle to heat their homes. Could the Minister outline what longer-term plans we are taking so that families can see the benefits of having a Labour government so they're not dreading this sort of weather?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. It's a really important question, and it's because of the dither and delay from the party opposite that we saw in their time in government that energy prices are still far too high. No one should have to make the difficult choices that he describes. What this government is doing is we are totally focused on getting the cost of energy down and making life easier for people across the UK. That includes the £150 off the cost of energy from next April, the removal of those costs from bills, and the extension of the Warm Home discount. We're also working with other government departments to improve access to data so that we can properly target support to households, and we will come forward with more proposals.
Don't tell the chance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Charities estimate that more than 6 million households in the UK live in fuel poverty. The Minister, in his answer, didn't even mention the Warm Homes Plan, but he talked about dither and delay. His government has repeatedly postponed publication of the Warm Homes Plan. It's cancelled previous fuel poverty programmes and not replaced them with new insulation programmes. So when will he publish, finally, the Warm Homes Plan? And how many of those 6 million households in fuel poverty will benefit from it?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I would say to the honourable lady is that it is worth waiting for the Warm Homes Plan, which is going to be published very soon. And as I said, alongside that will be a fuel poverty plan for England. This will be an ambitious plan. The Chancellor has already announced £15 billion worth of funding for that. And it will be an ambitious plan that we will lay out very soon. And I look forward to having constructive discussions with her about that when it is published.
Pippa Hailing, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Happy New Year. It's freezing outside, and tragically over 4,000 households in my constituency of South Cambridgeshire are living in fuel poverty, as we have just heard. The government's decision to cut ECO, which was the key mechanism for delivering home insulation and energy efficiency, without any details of what will replace it, risks pushing more families into fuel poverty, and the businesses and supply chains that have been fulfilling eco contracts for over a decade, left in limbo. We've just heard once again no date for when it will come. So will the Minister or Secretary of State finally confirm when it will be released, so ending the uncertainty for businesses and suffering of households?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Warm Home Plan will be published soon, and I look forward to having those conversations with her about how we roll out the ambitious plans in the Warm Homes Plan. What I would say about ECO is ECO was not successfully targeting those in fuel poverty enough. We were spending far too much on something that wasn't delivering the right results. Instead, what we will have under the Warm Homes Plan is £1.5 billion of additional capital support targeted at low-income people, and that is in addition to things like the Warm Home, the local grants that already exist through local authorities, which are targeting billions of pounds at low-income households. But more than happy to have further conversations with her when the Warm Homes Plan is published.
Charters.
Happy New Year, Mr. Speaker, and question 12, please.
Mr. Speaker, our Clean Energy Mission offers a transformative opportunity to deliver thousands of high-quality jobs and drive prosperity across the country. In Yorkshire and the Humber, we estimate up to 20,000 additional jobs by 2030, and there are opportunities across offshore wind, hydrogen and nuclear, as well as many other areas.
Luke Charters.
Speaker, I'm proud of York College in my constituency, where talented students are mastering apprenticeships that will power our clean energy future. York College is now considering becoming a clean energy technical excellence college under the outstanding leadership of Ken Merry. Would the Minister welcome this and visit it to see how it's leading the way in FE when it comes to preparing for the clean energy jobs of the future?
Well, I congratulate York College for the work that they're doing, and I know from my own constituency in Doncaster, where we're going to get a second UTC specialising in green skills, the importance of this and the excitement of young people about this future. And I think there's an important point here, Mr. Speaker. By turning their back on clean energy, they are turning their back on young people, parties opposite. Because this is the future. This is one of the fastest growing sectors. We want this for Britain, we want it for York, we want it for Doncaster, and we'll make it happen.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, it is not job creation that face many of my constituents, particularly those who work at the Lindsay oil refinery. The Secretary of State is aware that Axiom and others submitted bids that would have continued production at the refinery. Could he undertake to, well, instead we now have a deal with Phillips 66 that transfers the assets but not the business. Could the Secretary of State undertake to come to the House to answer the many, to give a statement to answer the many unanswered questions surrounding this deal?
Well, let me say to him, look, first of all, that what happened at Lindsay, and we should be clear that the responsibility lies with the owner that ran that business into the ground, is tragic for the workers and their families, and I've talked to those workers. He will know that because of the process, and my honourable friend has spoken to him about this, we had the official receiver who looked for the best and most viable bid. There wasn't a viable bid to keep refining going at Lindsay. That's why P66 was chosen, and we are determined to work with them to maximise the number of jobs that it can deliver for the local community.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Question number 13.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The transition to clean energy is the greatest opportunity we have for good job creation across all of the country, with 40,000 extra clean energy jobs in Scotland alone. That's why we published the Clean Energy Jobs Plan in October, which sets out how we'll work in partnership with industry and trade unions to deliver these jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the Minister's answer, and those 40,000 jobs are vital, but they are still diminished by the many thousands of jobs in the oil and gas sector. And we're seeing an increasing acceleration of job losses there. And increasingly people are going abroad, creating concern that the skills that we need for the green transition will be lost. So can the Minister tell us what the government is going to do to create transitional training and job movement within those two sectors?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government recognises the importance of the North Sea oil and gas industry and the importance of oil and gas for decades to come, but we also recognise that the North Sea is a declining basin, and that's why we published our North Sea plan, which supports the transition of workers in the North Sea into these clean energy jobs. And that's also why we're investing in our clean industry and bonus as well, which incentivises those businesses who are investing in offshore wind to ensure that those offshore wind jobs are located here in the UK. A fundamental difference between this Labour government and the previous Conservative government that was happy for those jobs to be elsewhere in other countries in Europe.
Total crime.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to creating clean jobs and local wealth, there's no better example in the community wind farm sector in my Nahill and Near constituency. I welcome what the government has done to clean up the grid connection queue, but the community-owned wind farm sector in my constituency is still stalled and can't get access to the national grid. Everyone agrees, NISO, Ofgem, private companies want to promote community energy, but unless ministers direct the regulators and the grid operators to give priority to community-owned wind farms, that will not happen. I'd like to discuss this with ministers, but also ask them to come and see how community-owned wind farming creates wealth and clean jobs in my area.
An offer you can't refuse, I'm sure, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We do recognise the issues that there have been around grid connections in the past, and actually accelerating grid connections and prioritising grid connections is something on which this government's taken by the scruff of the neck. I'm sure that my honourable friend, the Energy Minister, will be very happy to meet with him, and I think we'll be having a bit of a fight together to see which of us has the opportunity to visit his most beautiful part of the country.
Phyllis Meddy.
Thank you, Larry. The Contracts for Difference budget is vital for job creation and growth of the marine energy sector, yet the latest round removed the tidal stream ring fence and cut emerging technology funding. Can the Minister explain why these changes were made, and will he meet with me to discuss how marine energy projects like Model Icing and Ismorn can get the support they need to succeed?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Tidal stream is important. I want to be clear about that. We are keen to support it, and we are supporting it. The honourable member did mention the importance of the contracts for difference in supporting this. I mentioned previously the clean industry bonus as well, and that's exactly how we're doing that, using the contract for difference policy in order to ensure that through the clean industry bonus those jobs land in the UK.
Ren Lushman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Excellent work by the Labour government just before Christmas in saving 500 jobs in the chemical industry at Grangemouth. That's real Labour Party values in action. But we need to do more. How about investing in, or being really radical, owning a sustainable aviation fuel producing refinery at the site? The infrastructure is there, the need for SAF is there, and my people need jobs.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So can I thank my honourable friend for welcoming that news, and I know it was a really big day for him as well, and his dogged determination to champion his constituents is seen both in his constituency and here in this House. Of course, we are supporting Grangemouth, and the myalgae project, which was announced by the Chancellor in the budget, is exactly along the lines that he mentions. He talks about investment in sustainable aviation fuel, and we're seeing many private companies wanting to invest in sustainable aviation fuel in Grangemouth, in Teesside, in Humberside and across the whole of the UK. I'm sure we'll see more such plants in the future.
Now go to topicals. Carla Denny.
Happy New Year, Mr. Speaker. Climate change made 20... I beg your pardon. Question one of the topicals festivals. First time.
Mr. Speaker, the affordability crisis is the #1 issue facing families across our country. That's why we've actually taken £150 of costs off bills for all families, and an additional £150 through the Warm Home discount for 6 million households this winter. Thanks to our decisions, last year was a record year for wind and solar power, and we're embarked on the biggest nuclear building programme for half a century. That's what it means to deliver on lower bills, good jobs and energy security.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Climate change made 2025 the UK's hottest on record and fueled deadly extreme weather events across the globe. We know that every drop of oil and gas makes those events more likely. So will the Secretary of State confirm how much more new oil and gas could be extracted via the tiebacks that the government has decided to allow despite the new oil and gas ban? And when developers apply for permission for those tiebacks, will they be required to include Scope 3 emissions in their environmental impact assessment?
I have to say to the honourable lady, we've produced a worldly, and I do find her a little, I wish her Happy New Year, but a bit churlish in that question. We've produced a world-leading plan for the North Sea, which combines the just transition, the just and prosperous transition, with environmental leadership, keeping to our manifesto commitment not to issue new licences to explore new fields. Now, it's absolutely right that we also do tiebacks to ensure that that existing oil and gas fields are kept open for their lifetime. Obviously, the North Sea Transition Authority will consult on the details of how this is going to work, but it's absolutely the right thing to do for jobs and the environment.
Meg Hillier.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bannister House in my constituency in Homerton was one of the first community energy scheme in Hackney with solar panels on the roof, and it's the UK's largest scheme on social housing. The forthcoming local power plan gives the opportunity for others to follow where Hackney has led. Could he give some detail about the rollout of that so that we all know how we can prepare to bid for it?
Hackney Council, Labour-led Hackney Council, on the brilliant job it is doing in relation to green energy. Unlike some who just talk about it, they're actually delivering on it, and I congratulate them for it. Absolutely, I see Hackney as being at the forefront of our local power plan, which will be coming out in the coming months.
So does Secretary of State Claire Coutinho.
It's freezing cold outside, and people are worried about their energy bills. Yet on top of all the other costs he's lumped on people's bills, it's reported that he's about to tax people with gas boilers to pay for people with heat pumps. So can he definitively rule out for the rest of this Parliament No new taxes on people heating their homes.
I can absolutely rule out that we're going to introduce new levies into the energy system in the Warm Homes Plan. Absolutely. These reports are complete nonsense. And I can tell her what we are going to do in the Warm Homes Plan, and that is to turn the page on a decade of their failure. Because we're going to invest where they didn't. We have a plan where they didn't. We'll have proper oversight and regulation where they didn't. And we will tackle the cost of living crisis they caused.
Secretary of State, we're on topicals. I know you want to get carried away, but please, New Year doesn't allow for it.
Mr. Speaker, the rumours are he's pitching himself to be the next Chancellor. He didn't rule out taxes on people heating their homes for this Parliament. He's shutting down the North Sea, a disastrous EU energy deal, a secret deal with China, industry fleeing in its droves. Energy bills have risen 5 times on his watch. Doesn't this show he's got to be the only person in the country that could do a worse job than the current Chancellor?
Dear, oh dear. What can I say to that, Mr. Speaker? I mean, look, I'll say nothing. Don't tempt me. Don't tempt me. Look, I do want to make one point briefly. That we will be investing in the Warm Homes Plan, which will come soon, 15 billion of public investment to help people cut their bills. Now, they can oppose it if they like, but I think this will be supported across the country because they were an absolute failure on energy efficiency and all of that, and we're going to succeed.
Luke,
2021, energy network firms have pocketed £4 billion in excess profits under the previous price control regime set under the previous government known as RIIO-2, costs borne by all of our households through inflated energy bills. With Ofgem's new price control regime, RIIO-3, now published, can the Minister confirm that robust safeguards are in place to both secure the vital investment but also protect from profiteering and deliver value for money for bill payers?
Minister.
Well, network companies have benefited in the past, but Ofgem has moved to correct this in the RIIO-3 price control period so that this cannot happen again. And we are working with Ofgem every single day to make sure that we bear down on the costs of energy and that consumers in this country benefit from cheaper bills as quickly as possible.
Pippa Hailing, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Speaker, Brexit came at a huge cost, excluding us from the EU's internal energy market, costing the UK £350 million annually. So would the Secretary of State confirm to us how we'll accelerate progress towards the UK-EU internal electricity trading agreement to bring down costs and energy security in these volatile times?
Well, look, I think the Honourable Lady makes an important point, which is that we need to make sure that we take advantage of cooperating with our European neighbours. And one of the ways that we can do that is in the internal electricity market. And we will be negotiating on that basis. We obviously have to look at the costs and benefits for the UK, but anything we can do to lower costs, lower bills, and cooperate with our European neighbours for our advantage is what we should be doing.
Michelle Strockham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Without energy security, projects like Team Barrow and the regeneration of Barrow-in-Furness widely would be impossible to deliver. Does the Minister agree that large-scale proposals such as the Mesh Energy Storage and Decarbonisation Hub in the Irish Sea can play an important role in delivering the Government's Clean Power 2030 ambitions, strengthening energy security and creating skilled jobs? And will he meet Energy Pathways to discuss this project further?
So stay.
Well, it sounds like a really interesting project, Mr. Speaker, and my honourable friend is absolutely right about this. There are huge opportunities. Opportunities abound when it comes to cooperation with our global neighbours, our near neighbours, and cooperation across the world, indeed, to help our energy security, help deliver clean power and bring down bills.
Vicky Slade.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents welcome the £150 saving energy bills, particularly as it's now snowing. But Andrew from Arrow Energy Solutions is worried. 35% of his heat pump and solar installations were through ECO, and although he says it needed reform, he's worried about what comes next. I welcome the Warm Homes plans coming, but what can you say to Andrew and H2 Eco, another wonderful company, about the risk to jobs in that sector as we transition?
So state.
Well, look, the Honourable Lady asked an important question, and as part of the Warm Homes plan, we're putting in an additional £1.5 billion of public investment, replacing the ECO scheme, which I'm afraid was a failed scheme in a number of different ways, no disrespect to some of the installers. And that will be designed to help bridge the transition for companies like the one that Andrew runs.
Sonia Kumar.
Thank
you, Mr Speaker, and I'm proud that Dudley is home to Brockmore Energy and Environmental Scheme. That's the first net zero neighbourhood funded by the Richard Parker, the West Midlands Mayor. Will my right honourable friend set out what further measures he's taking to improve energy efficiency, retrofit homes, upgrade energy infrastructure in Dudley, and whether he agrees this scheme should be expanded?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My honourable friend is right to highlight the work of the Brookmoor Energy and Environmental Scheme, and I met recently with Richard Parker and hope to come and see some of these projects myself in the future. We'll soon publish the Warm Homes Plan. That will set out further plans to support projects like this, but we've already allocated £1.8 billion to local authorities and social housing providers through the Warm Homes Local Grant and the Warm Homes Social Housing Fund.
Peter Bedford.
Mr Speaker, since the government came to office, the average household energy bill has increased by £200. So the government's claim to be cutting bills by £150 hollow in my constituents. Now, will the Secretary of State commit to reviewing the green levies and taxes that continue to drive up energy prices for hard-working families?
Well, he's wrong if he listened to my answer earlier, because actually bills across 2025 were lower than 2024, and he should be welcoming our measures to cut bills by £150, but I'm afraid his front bench don't support us.
Alex Mayer. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. AW Group in my constituency has got 2 wind turbines and a solar array, which is creating what I think is Great Bedfordshire energy. But currently it gets muddled in with all the other energy in the area, and the company cannot have their own local tariff. Would the Minister consider community energy projects being able to sell direct to local consumers?
Well, this is exactly the work that we're looking at as part of the local power plan. We are determined, as my honourable friend rightly points out, to unlock much more community-owned energy and to make it as easy as possible for communities to connect to the grid and to deliver not just the clean energy that these projects bring, but the real social and economic benefits for communities too. And we'll publish the local power plan very soon.
Ollie Glover.
Mr Speaker, Space Solar, based on Harwell campus in my Oxfordshire constituency of Didcot and Wantage, plans to deliver commercial space-based solar energy by 2032. Given what we've heard today about the government's commitment to AI growth zones and the very high cost of industrial electricity, does the Secretary of State recognise the potential of space-based solar, and will he support British excellence and leadership in this emerging field?
Minister.
Well, we're genuinely excited about any new technologies that come forward. So innovation like that, of course, we're very interested in. We need a real mix of technologies to achieve our targets. So I'm very happy to find out more about it. And I'm trying to work out whether I can somehow work in a visit to somewhere in space to see these projects in practice.
Rachel Maskell.
Mr Speaker, we're really excited about the University of York's work in developing deep geothermal heat and believe that greater cost efficiencies can be achieved through sequencing projects, especially with hiring the drilling rig and equipment. So can the Minister say how he is driving efficiencies in deep geothermal so it's more viable for future developments like York Central?
Minister.
Well, I was really delighted to meet my honourable friend recently to talk about this exciting project in York and the wider developments that go alongside it. We do see the huge potential from geothermal and rightly, as she says, about how we structure these projects to get them forward as quickly as possible. My honourable friend, Lord Whitehead in the House of Lords, is taking this forward with a particular focus on geothermal, and I'm sure he'll be very happy to meet with her.
Market will have gone. Sir Olney.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. We owe it to future generations not just to have good environmental principles but to act on them, and that's why I will be voting against the third runway at Heathrow. Not my words, Mr Speaker, but the words of the Secretary of State in 2018. Given that Heathrow is already the biggest single source of carbon emissions in the UK and expansion will add an extra 8 to 9 megatons of CO2 to our atmosphere, can he confirm it is still his intention to vote against any expansion of the third runway at Heathrow?
The Secretary of State regularly meets with Cabinet colleagues about these issues. On Heathrow, this government is absolutely clear that any expansion must be compatible with our legally binding carbon budgets and net zero. We are committed to ensuring the economic benefits of airport expansions are delivered in line with our environmental and climate objectives.
Chris Webb.
Blackpool and the Fowl College have some excellent courses that are training young people in the area on the vital renewable energy equipment that we need to go forward. But there's no jobs for them locally. So will the Secretary of State agree to meet with me to discuss how we can get that job creation? And he's welcome any time to a sunny and a bit chilly Blackpool to come and see those students and the excellent work they're doing.
Same state.
Well, my honourable friend is a brilliant advocate for his constituency, indeed for Blackpool, and I'd be very happy to meet with him and talk about how we can make sure that those jobs that those young people want to have can come to Blackpool.
Dr. Luke-Evans.
If you're in Hinckley and Burbage, you can look one way and see lots of rooftops of logistics because we're the heart of the logistics sector. Looking the other way at Barlston and Nailston, you see agricultural land that's turned into solar farms. So my constituents rightfully say, why can't we have more solar panels on commercial properties? What's the government doing and conversations it's having with MHCLG to make sure this is a possibility?
Minister.
Well, the Honourable Gentleman is right. We should have many, many more solar panels on rooftops. We agree with them on that. I met with the UK Warehousing Association recently to look at some of the technical difficulties around ownership and around insurance. We want to do whatever we can to unlock the potential. We've got rooftops across the country that can play a huge part in helping us achieve our clean power mission.
Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Speaker. Once the political situation is stabilised in Venezuela, once foreign companies can be enticed to invest somewhere between 100 and 200 billion pounds, it will take emergency repairs, workforce modernisation and retraining and many more things to get that infrastructure and industry in Venezuela up to historical peak capacity. It could take up to 2040. Is it not easier and speedier for the UK to invest in homegrown renewable and nuclear to guarantee energy independence and get off the fossil fuel roller coaster, but also deepen our...
Please, it's topicals. Secretary.
Yes, my honourable friend is entirely right. Homegrown clean power is what is going to give us energy security.
Helen Maguire.
Mr Speaker, an estimated 50,000 diesel-powered transport refrigeration units operate across the UK, consuming around 235 million litres of fuel annually. Compared with emissions from truck exhaust, these generators emit up to 400 times the particle number. High-emitting diesel engines face no real regulation and create a significant burden on the NHS and the environment. But there is a solution. Zero-emission renewable transport refrigeration technology is commercially available and being manufactured in the UK today. Government intervention would help this. So will the Secretary of State come and see the fantastic work of SunSwap, who are championing this technology in my constituency, and can he...
Order, please. You've got to do topicals, and that is definitely not topical. Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Having slightly strayed into the area of the Department for Education earlier, I think it best that I stay out of the area of the Department for Transport. I will, however, ensure that that question is passed on to the relevant ministers for a response.
Dr Becky Cooper.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My hometown of Worthing is already delivering a major heat network, but is not yet designated as a heat network zone. Could the Minister please consider this designation at the earliest possible opportunity and ensure that grid capacity supports early designation for advanced schemes?
Yeah. Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Heat networks are crucial to future decarbonisation. I'd be more than happy to meet with her to discuss that in detail.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Mr Speaker, Positive Energy is a supplier to businesses in my constituency of Dewsbury and Backley. It has provided inaccurate contracts and bills to customers trying to bill them for premises they do not occupy. It has disconnected electricity supplies to customers without notice and fraudulently sent electricity bills for the meter they disconnected. And now Positive Electric is demanding payment of the standing charge for a meter. Will the Secretary of State investigate these rogue suppliers and advise how we will protect...
Put the question off, Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. If the member has details and sends them to me, I'm more than happy to look into that. This would be a matter for Ofgem, but there's also recourse available through the Energy Ombudsman.
Alistair Strathern.
I'm delighted we're investing in more rooftop solar, with GB Energy supporting deployment on schools and hospitals in my constituency, and the government taking up my requirement to have it on all new housing. But how can we make sure that from car parks to commercial warehouses, we're not missing out on the opportunities that these rooftops could pose to?
Minister.
My honourable friend's absolutely right. Look, we need a mix of technologies to achieve our clean power targets, and rooftops are an obvious place to do that. And I think there's actually broad consensus, even from those who disagree with other things, around how much we can utilise rooftops. So schools and hospitals, GBE's invested to bring down the bills of those public institutions, but we want to see much, much more of it on car parks and warehouses everywhere we possibly can.
Caroline Bowden.
Speaker, and a happy new year to you. This weekend, 4,600 properties in my constituency had their gas supply cut off on the coldest weekend of the year. Now, I'd like to commend Wales and West Utilities, who have worked tirelessly to get people reconnected, but their efforts have been hampered by the inability to communicate effectively with residents, as they don't have a direct relationship with their customers and they've had to rely on social media, which is not great in an area with lots of elderly people. We've also been hampered by the high number of second homes, and engineers have not been able to gain access to those properties. So would the Minister meet with me to discuss how providers such as Wales and West Utilities can communicate with households?
Order. I think the Minister will have got the answer ready.
Well, can I thank the Honourable Lady, and can I thank for engaging with me over the weekend on this issue? And I'm genuinely sorry there are still so many customers that aren't connected. The engineers are doing a fantastic job, but she rightly says the challenge is they can't reconnect until households are present to disconnect, and that is causing really significant problems. But they are doing everything they can. I'm very happy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bracknell Forest Council have submitted a bid to the Heat Network Delivery Unit for a feasibility study into a district heat network to stretch across our town centre. Would my honourable friend agree that schemes like this support local businesses and residents to cut emissions and cut bills?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member will have heard me say earlier how important heat networks are to decarbonisation. I'm more than happy to meet with them to discuss that, and they play such an important role in the future of providing energy across our country.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In November last year, the Energy Secretary and his entourage attended COP30 in Brazil. This was an event where a rainforest was chopped down so the Energy Secretary could talk about saving rainforests. Does he understand the hypocrisy of it all?
I don't understand the honourable gentleman, if I'm honest. I mean, look, basically, the truth is he would give up on young people. He would sell them down the river. He'd sell down the river today's generations, future generations, and all the generations to come. I don't think that's a very good platform to stand on.
Tim Farron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 25% of the houses in my constituency are built before 1900. They are expensive to heat, they are very difficult to insulate. When will there be a bespoke plan to insulate those properties with the right materials and, crucially, installed by specialists?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've had very constructive conversations with the member about this, and the Warm Homes Plan will be published soon, and we'll have something to say in that. Thank you.
Andrew Lewin.
Mr. Speaker, Happy New Year to you and your team. It was a happy start to the new year because we learned that in 2025 more renewable energy was generated in this country than any time on record, driven in particular by the growth in solar. So would my right honourable friend give me his New Year's resolution that this government's going to continue to drive forward and to surpass that target in 2026?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. This is about delivering on what we promised, on what we were elected, homegrown clean power to get bills down, create jobs, give us energy security, and crucially, do the right thing for future generations.
Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Almost a year ago, the Housing and Planning Minister and I had a really wonderful discussion about my Sunshine Bill, which would see all new homes, including solar panels on the roof. I understand the government is on the cusp of making an announcement about this. Can we be reassured that this is the year when we're finally going to force all of the developers to make us have nice green energy on our roofs? Thank you.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and I enjoyed being part of his sunshine debate. I've been very excited to work very closely with the Minister of State for Housing, who is with us this morning, and we look forward to that future home standards coming soon, very shortly.
Final question, Aaron Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Southampton is Europe's leading cruise port. It's the second biggest container terminal in the country, and our industry stands ready to invest millions in decarbonisation, but they are being held up by the grid constraints at the Nursling supply point. So will the Minister meet with me and local industry leaders to see how we can unlock the very obvious environmental and economic benefits that this would bring?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, our team will be happy to meet with him, and I think what this shows, and so many other questions, is the huge opportunities we have from homegrown clean power, including in fantastic Southampton.
Point forward to Bradley Thomas. It is on the question. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In response to my question asking whether bills in April 2026 will be lower than in July 2024, the Secretary of State claimed that they would be. However, the price cap would suggest otherwise. It was £1,568 in July 2024. It's projected to be £1,620 in April 26. Can you advise on how this House can seek a correction of the record?
Look, we're not going to continue the debate, but what I would say is you've certainly put it on the order paper unless the Minister wants to respond, which I don't think does. Secretary of State does, though.
Peter, I'm happy to respond, but we're going to be dealing the facts, Mr. Speaker, which is that bills were lower in 2025 than in 2024 in real terms, and the price cap was lower. And of course, making a seasonal comparison makes no sense. So absolutely, we're going to trade in the facts.
Sarah Oldham, point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I asked the Secretary of State a direct question about his former statements and how they conflict with current government policy. Would you agree with me, Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State should have directly answered me?
I don't have an opinion. I'm not responsible. But I certainly would say that you've got it on the record. Right, let us move on. Take care. Okay. From that changes. Good to see you, Claire.
Thank you so much. You can see from outer space today. So.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Let's start with presentation of Bill. Richard Tice.
Universal credit British
Order. Minister, please. Minister, you've just walked right through the middle of it. Come on, Whips, let's get her act together. Right, please.
Universal Credit British Citizens Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 16th January.
Friday the 16th of January. Richard Tice.
Local Government and Elections Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 16th January.
Friday the 16th of January. Thank you. We now come to the 10-minute rule motion, property. We start with Judy Gosling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Happy New Year to yourself and all your team. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring a bill to make provision about the requirements relating to the registration and valuation of domestic and non-domestic properties, to make provision about exemptions from such requirements and for connected purposes. For thriving communities, we need to have warm homes, safe places where people can live, thrive and survive, bring up their children and start their businesses. We want to see our local businesses championed with spaces to grow and support to make their dreams a reality. We want to see our high streets thriving, every shop filled, restored to the proud places they once were, the beating hearts of our communities. My residents in Nuneaton have grown all too used to high streets and residential areas littered with empty properties. Shuttered up shops, empty storefronts on our local high street deter shoppers and much needed investment. Vacant homes in disrepair are wasteful and leave hundreds of residents on waiting lists for housing and young families struggling to get on the property ladder. In my local area, figures have shown that Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council have over 1,800 empty properties. That's equivalent to 1 in every 24. Local leaders in Nuneaton, including Council Leader Chris Watkins and Councillor Steve Hay, have fought to address this issue, recognising the deep impact it has on our communities. It is literally a waste of space instead of providing hope and security. I know that they are supportive of the second home surplus, as well as the additional charges on long-term empty properties. These are important levers for local authorities that have been strengthened by this Labour government. However, these measures alone do not account for the full picture or scale of the problem that authorities like Nuneaton and Bedworth face. When a property is derelict, it is often removed from the valuation list. This is because it is no longer considered habitable or usable. It is no longer an asset. It was originally intended that these measures enable renovations to take place and properties without incurring additional costs. We support some of this and we do not wish to remove the whole legislation, merely time limit that exclusion. As a result, a deregistered property does not appear on the valuation list unless it is brought back into use. This has led to a situation where properties can lie unoccupied for years, potential wasted and eyesore, attracting antisocial behaviour and restricting the local authorities' capacity to transform our neighbourhoods and our high streets. In Nuneaton's case, we have seen properties left dormant for decades, with the former King's Home pub having stood empty since 2008, and 2 houses on Stony Road were removed from the valuation list in the year 2000. A quarter of a century that these homes have stood empty while we face a national housing crisis and children sleep in temporary accommodation. Nuneaton is growing. It is building the houses that we need,
But we also have to use those that we already have. We need to use the properties that we have effectively. Nationally, there are an estimated 260,000 residences long-term empty, 250,000, many of which have been zero rated and do not pay back to their local councils. I know my honourable colleagues will have the pleasure of getting the train through my constituency each week as they travel down the West Coast Main Line to Westminster. Those who venture further into Nuneaton will see firsthand the real impacts that these regulations are having. Nuneaton's transformed town centre, Greyston Place, is due to open later this year, a real opportunity to redefine our town, and yet at the town end of Cotton Road, as people enter the redeveloped, brilliant site, there is a row of empty properties, buddleia sprouting out of their roofs. 3 of those properties are nil rated. They hold no value, preventing the council from charging an empty properties levy and holding the owners to account for the neglect of the buildings that blight my community. At the other end of Cotton Road, next to the Carlton Arches, honourable colleagues will also find the core, formerly a church left to fall into disrepair. Despite the property no longer being owned by the church, and the property still receives its place of worship exemption, again meaning that it pays nothing. There is no incentive to bring it back from the brink or make these properties the assets that my town needs them to be. No responsibility for the impact on the area, and further to this, once a property has left the register, it becomes increasingly difficult to trace those responsible. Nuneaton and Bedworth Council very much welcomes increased powers, but this can only do so much. Like many councils, after a decade of harsh austerity, they lack the financial capacity to compulsory purchase or restore the sheer number of properties. Nuneaton and Bedworth Council leaders view the reorganisation of the Valuation Office Agency as a welcome step forward, but it is clear that current registration and exemption regimes need to be updated to ensure that councils have the power to hold the owners of these empty properties accountable for the state of their buildings and turn these eyesores back into assets. That's why my bill proposes that all properties should remain on the register unless they are demolished, and that all properties be given a value, and that all exemptions be time limited, ensuring that these properties are used, the exemptions are used for their exact purpose. As noted by my honourable friend, the member from North Durham, this is an issue that impacts almost all of our constituencies. Updating our current registration and exemption rules will provide us with the tools to embrace regeneration and to remove the barriers that hold us back. My honourable friends and colleagues, I hope that you will support this bill today and the measures within it. We want to see the effective use of our assets to make sure that all of our buildings are put to use to house our residents who need homes and to ensure that our high streets are open for business. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill.
Aye.
No, not quite yet. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. Are as many of that opinion say aye?
Aye.
The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare to bring in the bill?
Rachel Taylor, Kat Eccles and myself, Mr. Speaker.
Judy Gosling.
Property Registration and Valuation Bill.
Second reading what day?
16th of January 2026.
16th of January 2026. Right, the clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Cybersecurity and Resilience, Network and Information Systems Bill, second reading.
No. Minister, to move second reading. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much indeed, and Happy New Year to you and all the House staff. It's the first opportunity I've had to say that to you, and I beg to move that this bill be now read
a second time. Mr Speaker, on the 3rd of June 2024, a busy Monday morning in South East London, criminals attacked Synovis, an organisation that processes blood tests on behalf of our National Health Service. They didn't turn up physically, but logged onto computers thousands of miles away and set off ransomware, malicious software that encrypts files from afar, making them unusable. The attack had a ripple effect across London hospitals. It delayed 11,000 appointments. Blood transfusions had to be suspended, and the company lost tens of millions of pounds. This wasn't an isolated case. In the year leading up to September 2025, the National Cyber Security Centre has dealt with 204, and I quote, nationally significant incidents, meaning they seriously disrupted central government or our critical public services. That's more than double the 89 of 2024. No one disputes that we must do everything we can to protect the UK from these attacks. And why? Well, the UK is the most targeted country for cyber attacks in Europe. The UK was the 5th most targeted nation in 2024 by nation-state affiliated threat actors. In 2024, it is estimated that the UK businesses experienced over 8.5 million cybercrimes in the 12 months preceding that survey. And also of that year, over 4 in 10, 43% of UK businesses were subject to a cyber attack, over 600,000 businesses in total. And significantly, Mr Speaker, cyber attacks are estimated to cost UK businesses almost £15 billion each year, equivalent to 0.5% of the UK's annual GDP, notwithstanding the wider economic or IP theft or the experience indeed of patients, as in the first example. The average cost of a significant cyber attack for an individual business in the United Kingdom is estimated to be just over £190,000. There's been a 200% increase in global cyber attacks on rail systems in the past 5 years, increasing the likelihood of severe disruption to both the economies and people's daily lives. I'm happy to give way, yes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for giving way on that point. Would he agree, as we become more and more reliant on IT systems, I think in particularly for in my constituency of Harlow, the Princess Alexandra Hospital and the new system they have for patient registration, that it's more and more important that actually we combat the issue of potential cyber attacks, particularly from foreign powers and enemies of this country, and that's why this bill is so crucial.
Yes, I could agree more. And the example that I gave of the Synovis incident brought blood transfusion in London to a halt, which affected thousands of patients. So our everyday lives are affected by that. And as we modernise and digitise our economy, as we modernise and digitise government, we have to make sure that our systems are as secure as possible, and indeed cybersecurity is right at the heart of that. And it's not a defensive issue, it's actually very much an economic growth issue as well. If you see the impact it has both on our economy, on our public services, on the day-to-day lives of people, and indeed in the issue that I just gave before he intervened on our training system. I'm very happy to give it.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and great to see him in his post. On the point of economic growth, can he tell us how he has sought within this bill to balance the absolute need to have a regulatory framework that businesses can have confidence in, alongside being able to attract the continued investment and ensuring that we don't end up with an over-regulatory framework that stifles investment. Can he tell us how he's found that balance?
Well, this builds on the 2018 regulations, which was a hangover from the EU in terms of we adopting those into this country, and this expands on that, and very much to the intervention from my honourable friend previously. This is about an economic growth issue. It's about protecting our system. So we have to find a balance between making sure that our regulators have the powers and the tools to regulate properly, but also give businesses and our public services the confidence that they can use digital technology, knowing that we have the most secure cyber security in Europe, if not the world. And we're very, very good at this stuff. So that is the balance to be sought. But it's very much, this bill is about economic growth rather than about over-regulation for businesses. And I don't mean to say this flippantly, but cyber security is one of those areas, Mr Speaker, if everything is working, nobody notices. And when it isn't working, suddenly everyone notices and it's everyone's problem. And that's why we're bringing this scope of this bill forward in order for us to be able to extend that. I'm very happy to give way to the
Mr Speaker, can I thank the Minister very much for what he's saying and what he's bringing forward. There's much in the bill tonight to be encouraged for us. But the Minister, I know, is a regular visitor to Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland is the home to 130 cybersecurity companies with some 2,750 employees. It is therefore essential that this legislation protects those jobs and enhances capacity for more. So is the Minister able, or does he believe, that this bill both protects and provides opportunity for growth in Northern Ireland and indeed across the whole of the United Kingdom? Thank you.
Indeed it does, and it's one of a number of provisions that the government are bringing forward to create growth across the country, but not just in Northern Ireland. The Secretary of State's passion is to make sure those jobs are everywhere, right across the United Kingdom, including in Northern Ireland. And my friend the Minister has been in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, recently discussing this legislation and wider cybersecurity issues with the industry in Northern Ireland. So I can assure the honourable gentleman that that is indeed the case.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way, Mr Speaker. Hackney Council was the subject of a major cyber attack in 2020. It did a good job, though very slow because of the nature of the challenge, getting things back up and running. So this bill is very welcome. But pursuant to the answer to the question of my honourable friend, the member for Chesterfield, there are challenges for some of the smaller companies. I represent Shoreditch and all those tech companies that need to also maintain a standard on cybersecurity but are small. And so how is he going to balance the regulation for those smaller companies to make sure that they can keep abreast of things but are not so dampened down, as my honourable friend from Chesterfield highlighted, so they can't progress and grow?
But making sure we extend the 2018 regulations and the scope of those into other parts of the economy, and I'll come on to that in part of my contribution. And indeed it's about also reporting things quicker to make sure that the attacks can be seen and action can be taken quicker, and also that reporting into their regulators. So it's giving the regulators the confidence and the powers across a wider scope of sectors in the economy, but also giving businesses the confidence that those sectors are having to report into regulators when things are going wrong, and therefore swifter action can be taken. And you can see from a whole host of the high-profile issues that have happened in recent times, including in Hackney Council, that the Right Honourable Lady, my Right Honourable friend, mentions, why it's so important to make sure that these pieces of legislation go through quickly and indeed do the job that they're entitled to do so. I'm very happy to.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and I apologise for keeping intervening, but I just wondered, is there a piece of work that we need to do as well in terms of the culture and the fact that, you know, when businesses or the public sector are victims to cybercrime, there's a danger that employees may feel embarrassed and nervous about actually reporting their concerns, and to think we need to do a job, you know, to actually encourage people that if they are victims of cybercrime to come forward more quickly and recognise the challenges rather than sort of perhaps trying to, you know, hide it away and actually the issue become worse.
Well, thank you to my honourable friend for that intervention, because whilst physical security and national security is all of our issues, indeed so is cyber security. And what this is trying to do is to build on the 2018 regulations in order for us to widen the scope into other areas of the economy that have become much more prevalent, like data centres, for example. And I hope that that gives industries and sectors the confidence, including employees, to make sure they can report things into their regulators. The regulators are doing this and giving the powers to the regulators to give businesses confidence that they can report stuff in. It's not a regulatory heavy hand in order for us to be dampening businesses. So I hope I can give him and the rest of the House the assurance on that. Mr Speaker, before those significant number of interventions, I was talking about why this matters and gave some statistics to the recent cyber security activity in the United Kingdom. But it's why, because of all of that, after the election, one of the very first things we did as a new government was announce this new cyber security bill just 10 working days in. And since then, the department has been talking to cyber experts, businesses and regulators to turn these proposals into a comprehensive, serious and proportionate piece of legislation that we present here for second reading today. One that protects the public and strengthens national security without placing undue burdens on businesses. And I hope I can just repeat that again. One that protects the public and strengthens our national security without placing undue burdens on business. And I do appreciate that that is a very fine balance, but I hope this bill finds that balance. So I'm confident that the whole House will support it. I'm very happy to give way.
very grateful to the Minister for giving me where we support this bill in its efforts to tackle cyber security. What it doesn't do is address the mass unauthorised scraping of trusted news content by generative AI systems. This is content, as he knows, is often taken without consent and compensation. So as the bill progresses, will he be prepared to look at some measures? Maybe something like a bot register where people have to declare their intent when it comes to this type of activity? And will he look at this seriously so that news could be protected in this new environment?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman is very ingenious in the way in which he uses interventions on pieces of legislation. I know AI copyright is very close to his heart, being a former professional musician, maybe a current professional musician, and indeed one of the key musicians in MP4. Let's not push that to division, Mr. Speaker, but the AI copyright issue is, of course, a key issue that the government is currently looking at. Both Secretaries of State at the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology and Culture, Media and Sport are working very closely together on this issue. There will be will be coming forward. I think the legislation means that there has to be a report to Parliament in March of this year. I'm sure he'll be very interested in that. And we're bringing together the industry and the tech companies to try and find a way through that particular issue. We know it's a huge issue. It's not covered in the scope of this bill. This bill has been kept in terms of the scope very tight in order to deal with the specific issues and the serious issues of those cyber security debates and issues. So, as we know, the first duty, Mr. Speaker, of government is to keep people safe. And the question is how precisely the bill achieves that goal. The answer is simple. The UK's main cyber rules, the Network and Information Systems Regulations of 2018 or the NIS regime, were first introduced 7 years ago and haven't been updated since. These rules require the operators of essential services like energy, water and hospitals, as well as some digital service providers like online search engines, to take steps to protect the service they provide and the data they hold from cyber threats. But as you might expect, in the last 8 years, a lot has changed in the cyber landscape. We've had the rise of AI, which cyber criminals are using to their advantage. Data centres have become a firm fixture of modern life, and we want to see more. And since the rules were introduced, we've seen criminals evolve new tactics to exploit loopholes in the regulations, like the attack on the NHS supplier that I've mentioned, that revealed how hackers can target third parties, like IT companies or supply chains, as a backdoor to bring down a wider system. So as always, the story is one of technology and cyber threats moving faster than policymakers can possibly keep up with. I'm happy to give way.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. He's right to mention the impact on supply chains here. And as in the West Midlands, we've recently had the cyber attack on the JLR company. That had a significant impact not just on that company but on the supply chain, which has its roots right through the West Midlands. It's an essential part of our economy that was brought to a grinding halt by a cyber attack. So I'm just wondering if he can confirm to the House that this bill will help prevent such instances in the future.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, and can I thank him for all he did in terms of the issues in Jaguar Land Rover. I know it's very close to his own heart, and indeed it was a really big issue across the country, Mr. Speaker, of how a cyber attack can really not just affect one company, but the ripple effect throughout the economy. And of course, the government stepped in to unlock a £1.5 billion bolster to Jaguar Land Rover's cash reserves in order to help them through that particular problem. Now, I will say to the honourable gentleman, I'll come on to this slightly later, that Jaguar Land Rover and other private organisations are not covered by the scope of this particular bill. The reason for that is that individual private companies should be taking their own cyber security seriously and making sure that those incidents and threats are, the risks to those are minimised as much as possible. This particular bill is widening the scope of the existing regulations which don't take into that. But of course, the government is working very closely with Jaguar Land Rover, Marks and Spencer and others who've been in these high-profile cases, because we know from those big high-profile cases the real impact they can have on our economy. But indeed, had the government not stepped in and had this issue not been resolved, the impact on Jaguar Land Rover itself and the tens of thousands of employees at the plants and indeed in the supply chain would have been catastrophic and not really worth thinking about. So I thank my honourable friend for raising that particular issue. Mr. Speaker, as always, the story, of course, as I've said, is one of technology and cyber threats moving faster than policymakers can keep up with. But today we are fixing that. So the first change in the bill is to widen the scope of the existing 2018 regulations. To keep up with the changes of the last 8 years, we're adding a few new things to that list, starting with large load controllers. This includes any organisation that manages a significant flow of electricity to or from a smart appliance. It might be a company that supports electric car charging, for example. Bring these entities into scope will safeguard our power supply and give consumers confidence in using energy smart appliances, all of which is critical as we advance towards our Clean Power 2030 mission and net zero. We're also adding large data centres as number 2 in recognition of their growing importance to our day-to-day lives and to the economy. These are vast digital warehouses for the United Kingdom, home to servers that host everything from patient records to their bank details. This is the data that underpins all of our lives and our communities, and it must be protected. And we're expanding the scope of the regulations to include managed. These are organisations that provide ongoing functions, like an IT help desk, to an outside client. Their access makes them an attractive target for cyber attacks, as criminals can find one weak spot and bring countless organisations down. In 2024, an attack on a service provider for the Ministry of Defence, for example, compromised the personal data of around 270,000 people, military personnel, reservists and veterans. As organisations rely more and more on outsourced tech, we have to close this gap. In fact, weaknesses in the supply chain have become such a risk that we are going even further and allowing regulators to designate certain organisations as critical suppliers. This includes certain suppliers to essential services that could have significant impact on the economy or society as a whole. Key suppliers to water companies, grid operators or air traffic control, for example. These critical suppliers will be subject to cybersecurity duties, which we will set out in secondary legislation. I'm happy to give way.
Last year, the Treasury Select Committee wrote to the top 10 banks in the UK because there had been a number of outages. No suggestion that cyber security is involved in most cases, but a trend coming back from the responses was that third-party software providers were often the source of the issue. What is his thinking about how to involve the banking sector in the scope of this bill?
Well, the banking sector are obviously in the scope of the regulators in terms of cyber security, and there has been a number of outages that the Right Honourable Lady mentions. But I think the general principle here is that cyber attacks are no longer coming in through the front door. They're coming in through third parties, they're coming in through suppliers. We've seen that in the recent incidents at Heathrow, for example, in cloud outages with AWS and other companies like that. So they are covered by their own regulations, and similar to the answer to my honourable friend about Jaguar Land Rover, they won't be in the scope of this particular bill, but we do hope that the financial services sector, who are leaders in cyber security actually for a whole host of fairly obvious reasons, take that forward. Let me also say, Mr Speaker, I know that the recent attacks on British icons, as we've discussed, like Marks & Spencer and Jaguar Land Rover, will loom large in people's minds, and indeed many members across the Chamber have already mentioned them. Supply chains were thrown into chaos, with small businesses paying the price, and that shows the ripple effect across the economy. When one part of the system is attacked, that ripple effect into other businesses, into smaller businesses, into patients in terms of our public service examples earlier, are really quite clear. So we are clear. All businesses, and that covers both financial services, Jaguar Land Rover, Marks & Spencers and others, must take immediate steps to protect themselves. That's why in October, members of the Cabinet wrote to the FTSE 350 companies, urging them to strengthen their defences by doing 3 things. Firstly, to make cyber risk a board priority. Secondly, to require suppliers to have a Cyber Essentials certificate. And thirdly, sign up to their early warning service. This was followed by a similar letter to entrepreneurs and small businesses in November with bespoke advice for smaller teams. We know these actions work. Organisations with Cyber Essentials are 92% less likely to claim on cyber insurance than those who don't. Businesses who best know how to protect themselves, so we're not here to regulate for the sake of regulating. Government is taking action too. And I announced this morning the Government's Cyber Action Plan sets a radically new model for how government will strengthen its cyber resilience. Backed by over £210 million of investment, government departments will be held to equivalent standards to those set out in this bill. And that's why the public sector and the government is not included in the scope of the bill because of the Cyber Action Plan. Government shouldn't need to legislate for itself, but just get on with making sure that we're leading the charge and making sure that the Cyber Action Plan strengthens our own government cyber. I don't know if that was an attempt at intervention from the opposition front bench, but I'm happy to take it. Yes, I'm very happy to go.
Well, I welcome the Minister's comments about the obligation on the public sector. However, I would caution him that in my experience, cybersecurity is one of those things that ministers talk about, but then other priorities overtake it. And the advantage of legislative requirements is it forces ministers to think about it. So I would just urge the Minister, as this bill passes through Parliament, to look again at that point. I think there is a case for putting more stringent requirements on the public sector in order to force ministers' minds on the point.
Can I thank the right honourable gentleman for that intervention? I know he would have had some involvement in this when he was on this side of the chamber, and indeed the 2018 regulations came out of the previous government, and we are all trying to make sure that we're catching up with the technology as quickly as it moves. It's a very interesting point that he makes, which I'm very conscious of and happy to take away. I hope the Cyber Security Action Plan today, which is backed by £210 million, we're determined to deliver that. I'm determined to deliver that. I know the previous actions that the previous government took didn't come to fruition in terms of that 2030 target that they had, which is why we've refreshed the action plan and brought it forward with some significant cash. So it's really important for us to make sure, as ministers, we take that forward, and I hope that he will hold us to account to ensure that we are fulfilling that promise in the Cybersecurity Action Plan, because I do feel that public services and indeed central government must take the leading role to show businesses that this is the real approaches to take, is to make sure all our systems are as secure as possible for not just economic grounds but for the people that we all seek to represent. Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy to give way to you.
Thank the Minister for giving way, and also for the excellent points he's making with regard to the importance of cyber security and the Cyber Security Action Plan. Could he perhaps say a little bit about the way in which the success of the Cyber Security Action Plan will be measured, monitored and communicated back to this House? He is probably aware that only 33,000 cyber essential certificates were issued, for example, in 2024, and so an increased take-up of cyber essentials and the guidance in the action plan is essential.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in the action plan itself, there are some key dates in there to monitor progress, and I wrote to the Honourable Lady, the Chair of the Select Committee, this morning at the publication of the action plan to lay out some of those issues. So the letter will be landing. Very happy to come to the Select Committee to discuss that in more detail in front of the committee, and hope that the committee and indeed opposition and our own benches hold us to account for delivering on this, because it is so fundamentally important to government, whether it be digitisation, modernising government, winning the case with the public about why digitisation is so important and why government should be as secure as it possibly can be, and leading the charge on that across all of the economy. So I hope that we can take that forward, and the committee can take that forward in the weeks and months ahead. Mr. Speaker, I was talking about the launch of the Government Cyber Action Plan this morning, backed by over £210 million of investment. Government departments will be held to equivalent standards to those that are set out in this bill, and I hope that partially answers the question from my honourable friend, the Chair of the Select Committee. But while the focus of this bill is on essential services, it will also indirectly help businesses, including those damaged by the recent attacks, and government. Almost all organisations today rely on data centres or outsourced IT or some kind of external supplier. So by extending the bill's oversight, we're preventing attacks that could, in theory, reach thousands of organisations. The second change in the bill is to give new powers to our regulators responsible for enforcing the NIS framework. Effective compliance is crucial to the success of any regime. These reforms could be world-leading on paper, but without proper enforcement, they are meaningless. So the bill will... Very happy to give way.
Clarification point. So we've talked about the regulators having new powers to designate critical national infrastructure in regard to cybersecurity threats. Who actually has accountability? Because I've been looking at the bill now. It says regulation made by the Secretary of State. Which Secretary of State is that when this is a cross-departmental and cross-government approach?
Cybersecurity is the responsibility of the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, but indeed the Cabinet Office obviously have a clear resilience issue as well, and we will have heard that from your right honourable colleague who was in the Cabinet Office previously. So the Secretary of State, maybe the DSIT Secretary of State, will make those regulations, but there are a plethora of regulators involved in this process, because obviously if you're talking about energy, if you're talking about water, data centres, they all have different regulators, so they are being empowered through this legislation, through the expanded scope of the number of sectors that are being brought into the legislation, for those regulators that regulate those particular sectors to take the responsibility. I'm happy to give way.
extremely grateful to the Minister for giving way. On that point about regulators, the industry have issued a brief which points out quite sensibly that these regulators are going to have a lot of extra duties to perform and will therefore need extra resources to be able to perform those duties. But the extra resources they require will only be unlocked when the bill itself has passed. So is there not a danger of a transition period where duties will be laid on regulators to fulfil their role before they've got the resources to carry it out?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we have to pass the legislation before the legislation may be amended in this House. The legislation may change through the passage of its progress through both Houses, and therefore the regulators in that sense will not know what they're regulating until the bill has actually passed. But we've been working, as I mentioned at the start of my contribution, with regulators, with businesses and with organisations and cybersecurity experts in the run-up to producing this bill to make sure it's in the right place, that's proportionate on businesses, proportionate on regulators, but make sure mostly, which I think is the most important thing, that it's effective. So I'm sure we'll have those debates as we go through the whole of that, the process through the committee stage and indeed third reading in this House of those kinds of issues. But I very much acknowledge what the Right Honourable Gentleman has said. Mr. Speaker, the bill will strengthen the powers of the NIS regulators, ranging from Ofgem to the Civil Aviation Authority, who together uphold the UK's cyber-based rules across different sectors. I maybe took the intervention 10 seconds too early in this particular contribution, because they work together to uphold the UK's cyber rules across those different sectors. We're raising the maximum fine they can impose, for example, while simplifying the penalty bands to make them clearer. The key driving force for this measure is not the punishment of rule breakers or raising revenue, but to incentivise firms to be vigilant. Our goal is 100% compliance and zero fines. We'll also be asking regulated organisations to change the way they report attacks, expand both the types of incidents they have to report and the time frame in which they have to report them. This is a small but crucial change. Under the current rules, regulators only get notified about a breach once it has already caused significant disruption, when traffic lights have failed or the heating has shut off, but the system doesn't include cases with the potential to cause a crisis much later, like a hospital's computer system quietly being spied on as hackers wait for their moment to strike. Under the bill, if you are in scope, you will have to tell your regulator and the National Cyber Security Centre about these types of breaches within 24 hours and provide a full report within 3 days. Pace and speed is of the essence. This will not only give us better information, but help agencies warn others, if they need to, before they become the next target. The bill will also allow the government to set clear and consistent outcomes for regulations to work towards. One of the virtues of having a regime enforced by different agencies is that each has sector-specific expertise. Ofgem understands the complex digital systems that underpin the national grid. The Aviation Authority knows the precise threats to air traffic control. But this approach has sometimes led to inconsistencies in how the regime is applied, with some bodies interpreting the rules differently from others. Today's bill aims to fix that, with a single set of objectives issued by central government across the board. We will send the message: no sector is an easy target in the UK. We will also be improving the way regulators, intelligence agencies and law enforcement share information with each other by providing greater clarity on what information regulators can share and receive. And it's important that regulators have the resources to do their job, going to the point from the Right Honourable Gentleman. So the bill will also give them new powers to recover the full costs associated with their regulatory duties. And to ensure transparency, regulators will consult on how these fees will be calculated and publish a statement each year to show how these funds were being used. Together, the measures add up to a much more consistent and effective regime with better reporting and much clearer guidance for all involved. Mr. Speaker, this bill ensures the UK's cyber security regime is not only fit for today, but is flexible enough to head off future threats as well. I mentioned a few of the things that have changed in the last 8 years: shifts in technology and the nature of cyber attacks, artificial intelligence, data centres, the economy. But one of the biggest changes, of course, was Brexit. Since our official exit from the European Union in January 2020, we've been unable to amend the NIS regulations without primary legislation, because the rules were originally part of European Union law. This has made it slow and difficult for us to keep pace with new emerging threats and technology. Meanwhile, Brussels is pressing ahead with NIS2, their forward-looking update, while we lag behind. This procedural quirk has left essential UK services more exposed, which perhaps tells us something about why the UK has such appalling figures in comparison to some of our EU counterparts, as hackers and cybercriminals exploit gaps in outdated laws. It's an unacceptable risk. So today's bill includes new powers for the government to update the NIS regime via secondary legislation in future to make it quicker and more agile to moving technologies. If we need to respond quickly, for example, to a new type of cyber threat, this is not to override Parliament. In almost all cases, the government will still be required to consult on any changes, and Parliament will have the final say over any legislation made under this power. But delegated powers are essential for keeping us as responsive as possible. When national security is on the line, we need the ability to act fast and decisively. In fact, in extreme cases, some threats emerge so rapidly that even secondary legislation is too slow. If an ally were to be invaded by a hostile state, for example, suddenly escalating the cyber risk to the UK. So the government will also be given powers to direct regulators or regulated entities where national security is threatened to issue specific cyber security guidance in a crisis, for example. These powers are intended as a last resort to protect our national security, and safeguards are built into the bill to make sure they are used accordingly. But let me end by saying this, Mr. Speaker. The UK's cyber sector is the third largest in the world. We heard that from our friend from Northern Ireland. It achieves double-digit growth year on year. We have fast-growing clusters of expertise in Cheltenham and in Manchester, and this legislation will supercharge that success, doubling down on one of our nation's greatest assets. And at its core, this bill is about protecting the essential services that we all rely on. So the lights always stay switched on, clean water always runs in the tap, and hospitals are always safe and secure when we need them. The real-life community issues that we all encounter every single day and all of our constituents encounter every single day. This is more than a technical upgrade. It's a bold commitment from government to protect one of our biggest economic strengths and to keep the UK safe in a rapidly evolving digital world. Together, working towards a future where security is not a hope but a guarantee. And I commend this bill to the House.
Yeah. The question is that the bill now be read a second time. Shadow Secretary of State Julia Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Happy New Year to you, and thank you very much for putting the heating on. And I'm grateful to the Minister for setting out the government's rationale for this legislation instead of the Secretary of State. I don't know why he was demoted either, but I want him to know that we appreciate him. We, as the opposition, recognise the scale of the cybersecurity challenge that the country faces. If the pandemic accelerated the adoption of digital technology at a pace we'd never before seen, then the advent of artificial intelligence will embed that technology into our economy in wholly new ways, ways that bring opportunity, of course, but also unprecedented risk. AI and automation will not only transform productivity, they will equip hostile states, criminal gangs and opportunists alike with tools capable of eroding our national defences at speed and at scale. It is right that Parliament is legislating to raise the collective security bar. We on this side of the House support that principle. But legislation of this kind does not come around often. Cyber law takes time to develop, and once this bill passes, it's unlikely that Parliament will return to this territory for some years. That means we must ask two very simple but very serious questions today. Will this law work, and is it enough? Before answering those questions, it's worth reminding ourselves of the real-world consequences of failure, because cyber risk is neither abstract nor theoretical. Last year, the UK experienced what is widely regarded as our most economically damaging cyber incident to date, when Jaguar Land Rover suffered a major attack. This was not a sophisticated act of cyber warfare against the state, though such acts are happening with increasing regularity. It was by a band of hackers, but the consequences were enormous. For 5 weeks, Jaguar Land Rover was unable to operate its automated manufacturing lines. Cyber-related costs mounted to nearly £200 million. National economic output was visibly affected in that month alone. But the real damage did not stop at the factory gates. Hundreds of SMEs in the supply chain, many operating on thin margins, were pushed to the brink. Workers faced uncertainty, contractors had their work paused, and ultimately the government had to step in with £1.5 billion worth of loan guarantees to prevent wider economic fallout. So when we consider this bill, we must ask whether it would have done anything to strengthen our collective resilience. That is one of the tests this legislation ought to meet, and it's not yet clear that it does. Indeed, certainly JLR would not have been stopped as an attack, as the Minister himself has made clear, because it would not have been in scope. The cyber threat landscape is evolving at an extraordinary pace. New research shows that cyber attacks now cost our economy nearly £15 billion every year. High-profile breaches of businesses like Marks & Spencer's and the Co-op have demonstrated how quickly consumer confidence, jobs and supply chains can be put at risk. Last year alone, insurers paid out £197 million to help businesses recover from cyber incidents. In fact, the FTSE 100's collective cyber insurance bill is now larger than the defence R&D budget. The bill seeks to respond to one aspect of this reality by expanding the scope of existing regulations. Data centres, managed service providers, load controllers and designated critical suppliers will now fall within its ambit. That is a welcome acknowledgement that digitisation has introduced systemic risks that the original NIS regulations of 2018 did not adequately cover. The bill also strengthens the powers of regulators, introducing cost recovery mechanisms, and it tightens incident reporting requirements. These measures are intended to modernise our cyber framework and address clear shortcomings identified in reviews of the NIS regime in both 2020 and 2022, and on paper that all sounds sensible. But intent alone is not enough, which brings me back to our central concern. Will this law work in practice in raising the standard of our collective resilience? The uncomfortable truth is that in some of the most high-profile cases of cyber attack, penetration of systems happened by attackers who used valid credentials. Systems behaved normally. The breaches looked like legitimate access until it was too late. Human frailties were exploited. Help desks persuaded to reset passwords. Staff or contractors impersonated. This bill mainly helps after an attack, not before, by mandating reporting, improving intelligence sharing and increasing accountability. And as I say once again, as the Minister is certainly...
Minister, it's a friendly intervention. I'd always like to get a bit of cross-party agreement in the House where possible. And the question I asked the Minister with regard to the importance of changing the culture to employees to make sure they do report cyber attacks and feel confident to report cyber attacks, would she agree with that?
Agree with that, and he is fundamentally correct that this is about culture, and this is the point I'm making, that as many regulations as we can pass, a lot of the holes in our cyber security systems come down to human frailties, and this is one of the challenges that means it's not just about new laws. This is about changing a whole number of things to make us more resilient in this space. It is right not to dictate technical standards in primary law that will soon be outdated in the fast-moving world of technology. So the question really is whether this law is the right mix of carrot and stick to make affected firms act in a way that raises the security bar. Now, there are several areas where we fear it may not. First, there is potentially an enforcement paradox. The bill expands regulatory powers and increases the scale of potential fines, but the evidence from the existing regime does not suggest definitively that fines and new regulations deliver us greater cyber resilience. Under the current NIS regulations, enforcement's been slow, inconsistent and often toothless. Very few significant penalties have been issued, and where they have, the delay between incident and sanction has sometimes stretched beyond 2 years. That delay matters because it actively undermines deterrence. It disconnects accountability from operational reality. Simply widening the scope of regulation without ensuring that regulators are properly resourced, empowered and required to act quickly risks creating obligations that exist on paper but lack any real-world bite. We also have concerns about the bill's cost recovery model. Funding regulators through levies on the organisations they oversee risks unintended consequences in terms of improving our resilience. For large firms, the cost burden may be manageable, but for smaller enterprises, it amounts to an additional operational tax that could divert scarce capital away from cyber defence, staff training and innovation. There's also a structural risk here. Regulators reliant on fee income may face incentives to expand scope and complexity unnecessarily, creating bureaucratic drag that crowds out voluntary, market-led initiatives that often raise standards more effectively than prescriptive regulation. I also worry more generally that this will play into tech monopolies. The companies that thrive under this kind of environment are the ones with big compliance and legal departments. That concentrates risk and makes our tech economy less diverse, with serious implications that I shall come on to. There may be reporting challenges too. Again, a two-stage reporting process within 24 and 72 hours may be achievable for large, well-resourced But for smaller operators, this risks creating compliance culture focused on speed, not substance. There's also already face overlapping reporting obligations under UK GDPR, sectoral rules and existing legislation. Without simplification and proportionality, the administrative load could be significant, once again diverting attention and resource from the very cyber threat management the bill seeks to improve. We need to avoid this becoming a something must be done bill that totally misses the mark. The bill also fails to grapple properly with the human factor in cybersecurity, already talked about by the Right Honourable Gentleman for Harlow. Technology alone does not keep organisations safe. Governance matters. Yet board-level ownership of cyber risk is moving in the wrong direction. Only 27% of businesses now have a board member explicitly responsible for cybersecurity. That is down from 38% just 3 years ago. Without mechanisms to ensure senior accountability, fines risk becoming little more than a cost of doing business. Directors remain insulated while operational teams are left to carry the can. National cyber resilience depends not just on systems and software, but on leadership, on culture and accountability at the very top. For those reasons, ahead of Bill Committee, we on this side of the House are examining how the legislation can be strengthened while continuing to support its core objectives. In the meantime, regulators must be properly equipped with the right powers, resources and clarity from Parliament on the law's intent. Sanctions must be applied swiftly and consistently, and guidance must be clear, so enforcement is credible and deterrence is real. The government should also look at how reporting obligations are calibrated. A one-size-fits-all approach may place disproportionate burdens on smaller firms, and it may be better to ensure reporting thresholds reflect the size, complexity and risk profile of an organisation. Equally, the funding of regulators must be transparent and predictable. There have to be safeguards against regulatory expansion for its own sake, and firm assurances that funds raised are reinvested directly into improving national cyber resilience, not absorbed by administrative overheads. While the bill rightly prioritises critical national infrastructure, it cannot afford to ignore high-risk sectors that sit beyond its immediate scope. There's also a major role for market-based solutions. Cyber insurance, sector-wide intelligence sharing and collaborative resilience initiatives can all complement regulation. These tools can reduce risk and improve preparedness without adding unnecessary legislative complexity. Finally, the review cycle set out in the bill may be too slow for the threat landscape we face and the pace of technological change. Annual or biennial reviews might allow Parliament to scrutinise effectiveness, respond to emerging threats and ensure the legislation remains fit for purpose. I'd like to finish by making some more general points about the government's approach to cybersecurity and resilience, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker. Issues about the risk of dependence and threat from adversaries. I see no evidence from this government that it is thinking with any clarity about the risks of long-term technological dependency and lock-in. In fact, quite the opposite. Large parts of our economy now depend on secure, high-quality digital infrastructure, a reliance that will only increase as AI advances. Whoever provides that infrastructure will wield huge future leverage. It was that reality which ultimately drove the change of heart over Chinese tech sitting in the core of our 5G telecom networks a few years ago. Now, however, the government is seemingly betting every chip on US hyperscalers. They provide our data centres, they supply the platforms on which government departments are now run. They more often than not are the ones winning all the government contracts. These investments will, of course, provide our companies with things they need, from compute power to increasingly sophisticated AI platforms. But the UK is doing little simultaneously to mitigate against our increased technological dependency. And when I say technological, we need to understand that technology is what we now run our defence systems, factories, energy networks and communications on. Technology is the plumbing of our nation. During September's much crowed about state visit by President Trump, this government was visibly begging for good economic headlines after the humiliating resignations of the Deputy Prime Minister and US Ambassador, not to mention the uncontainable mess of the Chancellor's first budget and the threat of her second. The US-UK tech partnership was the result, with a huge amount of smoke and mirrors deployed over what it actually contained. Whatever substance lay within it, we heard just before Christmas that it had been paused, used as leverage by the US while other trade negotiations are underway. I'm not criticising the US administration for skillfully playing its hand in its national interests. I'm asking this government rapidly to wake up to the reality of a new world in which the post-war settlement is coming to an end. A new world that's been giving clues to its existence for many years now, long before President Trump came into office. The United States remains a vital ally, but in this new era, Britain must be very clear-eyed about risk, the reality of hard power and the need to protect our sovereign interests. Cyber risk requires as much thought about the fundamentals of plumbing as it does about the laws that try to manage how humans use or exploit technology. The UK government has a vast procurement budget for which our own firms ought to be able to make a successful bid. But UK Tech tells me consistently that for all the talk in the government's AI strategy of sovereign tech capability, they have not got a look in since Labour has been in power. I'm concerned that this bill does not introduce new, burdensome regulation for UK firms in a way that benefits non-UK incumbents with giant compliance teams and legal resources in a way that would exacerbate the risk of vendor lock-in. Let us turn to another risk. The private sector will have noticed that the new obligations within this bill broadly do not touch the public sector, where cyber risk remains red light flashingly large. Notwithstanding, as I say, the public cyber strategy that was thrown out today in implicit acknowledgement of that gaping hole. Knowing that the public sector holds such enormous cyber risk, this Labour government chooses not to minimise it, but to create a brand new one, a hulking great identity system mandated for anyone who wants a job, and now we hear possibly for newborn babies. Mandatory identity by stealth, not consent, and with no honesty about it. It is not to be against the ability of people to verify themselves digitally for banking or to access certain online services or to stop fraud, to think that Labour's mandated digital identity plan is a complete rotter. The Association of Digital Verification Professionals called what Labour inherited on digital identity a world-leading model for data sovereignty that digitised liberty rather than diluted it. The citizen, not government, in control. Now this naive government is crowding out private sector expertise and making everyone have one of these identities by stealth. It has no idea what this system will cost, and it will not be honest about what it will be used for. And what of the cybersecurity of this system? Well, the system on which this digital identity will be run was breached during red team testing last year. When I asked the Secretary of State if that system has now met the NCSC's cybersecurity standard, no answers came. Whistleblowers have continued to speak out about the vulnerabilities of the system, and there is no sense whatsoever from government that the dodgy digital identity plan will be paused until such point that they are confident about cybersecurity. Certainly.
Absolutely staggered, Madam Deputy Speaker, to hear the Shadow Minister talk about standard software testing practices as though someone is doing wrong by trying to penetrate systems and trying to find flaws in it. Isn't the whole point of software testing to find the flaws in the system and get them fixed, rather than parading them in front of the House of Commons as though it's some sort of failure?
I think the honourable gentleman is willfully misinterpreting what I'm saying. There's not an issue with having systems tested. There is an issue with the fact that the system tests failed. And there is no evidence that the government has therefore acted to deal with those systemic failures. The whistleblowers continue to talk about the serious concerns about the structures on which the government's digital identity platform will be built. And he's sitting there looking absolutely outraged that I might suggest that there are some concerns about the cybersecurity risk of a national mandated digital identity platform. And personally, I find that absolutely extraordinary. The idea that I'm talking about my concerns that a system might be tested, of course, every system must be robustly tested. That is not the point I'm trying to make, and I think he is being willfully ludicrous in trying to suggest otherwise. So I asked Madam Deputy Speaker, can this Prime Minister run an economy? No. Can this Prime Minister keep promises? No. Can this Prime Minister control his backbenches? No. Can he control his front benches? No. So how on earth does anybody think he can run a secure digital identity system? So at the same time as risking technological lock-in by friendly allies, we're creating new vulnerabilities for adversaries to attack. Just before Christmas, UK intelligence agencies warned about increasing large-scale cyber espionage from China, targeting commercial and political information. We discovered from ministers that the Foreign Office itself was subject of a major cyber attack in October, which officials believe was carried out by Chinese hackers. This in the midst of a major row between the government and CPS over the prosecution of spies operating here in Parliament. We will be looking closely at this legislation for where government should be addressing this cyber reality with much greater force. An approach to cyber resilience that looks only at introducing new regulations and compliance burdens without thinking through risks like a mandated identity scheme, dependency on non-sovereign suppliers, the malign intent of other nations, and a failure to build up our own workforce and skills is one which will fail. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, we support this cyber... Certainly.
From my old friend, but as she's coming to the end of her remarks, I don't think I heard anything mentioned by the Minister about risks of cyber attacks on local government. That is another potentially juicy target for people who wish to cause major mischief. Does she agree?
Well, my honourable friend will be aware that this is outside the scope of the bill, but it is a very juicy target. There's much in the public sector that remains a very juicy target. And I think, as I say, in acknowledgement of those juicy targets, the government whipped out very quickly this morning a strategy that's meant to give us assurances about public sector resilience when it comes to cyber. And I'm not sure that it will provide much reassurance. And this is why I think it's important that we understand that this cyber bill can only be one part of a much wider arsenal that looks at tightening gaps where they exist, both in the private sector but also in the public sector. Certainly.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's really worth clarifying for the House that we've brought forward the government cybersecurity strategy this morning because the 2022 consultation that was brought forward by the previous Conservative government was not acted upon. This government is acting on those threats, bringing forward a plan that we will then subsequently see through, and I think she should acknowledge that, or the Honourable Lady should acknowledge that.
Well, I welcome it, but I haven't actually had the chance to have a good look at it because the government always seems to publish these sorts of documents right at the last minute. It's remarkable. The only way to get any information out of this government is to apply some pressure in this House, and then remarkably things come flying out of the cupboard. And I will be very interested to see what this strategy looks like and whether it really is up to the challenge that faces us now. Since we were in government, the problems and risks of cyber have markedly increased because of the advent of AI technology that is changing the picture very, very rapidly, just as the defence picture is changing very, very rapidly. And my concern is that this government is not taking seriously enough the various defence and security challenges that face this House, prioritising spend on welfare payments and union payments and all other manner of things. And it's one thing to get a strategy out of the door, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's another thing to actually put in the measures that will implement the strategy. And I think basically what we've seen in the last 18 months is strategy documents and not a great deal of delivery. It's one of the reasons why the government is so rapidly losing public confidence. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, we do support this cyber bill in principle. The threat is real, growing, and it demands actions, but it can be seen as only a tool, not a cure-all. A government that's trying to close down gaps in one place while willfully opening up huge new risks in a different corner is being negligent in its approach. Further, if this legislation is to command confidence, it must be practical, proportionate, and genuinely effective. Without meaningful improvements, this bill risks placing new burdens on business while delivering only marginal gains when it comes to our national resilience. Cybersecurity is a shared responsibility between government, regulators, industry and the public, but leadership must come from the top, and that is where this bill currently falls short. With the private sector taking the lion's share of the load while gaping holes remain in public sector cyber defences, the bill begs obvious questions about the confidence citizens should have in flagship government projects like the Prime Minister's mandatory digital identity. As it stands, this bill would not have prevented high-profile cyber shutdowns like Jaguar Land Rovers. It does little to address the chronic vulnerabilities in the public sector, and it certainly will not make Labour's dodgy ID database any more secure. This is why, as this bill makes its journey through Parliament, we will be pressing this government to ensure it delivers genuine security, proper accountability, and raise cyber defences across the board, while taking them to task on major mistakes like mandatory ID. For cybersecurity is no longer a niche compliance exercise. It is about protecting the fundamental economic and defence interests of our nation.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I start by welcoming this bill. It's a serious step forward in protecting the United Kingdom from the cyber attacks that we face daily, and a great number each day. But this legislation, as we just heard from my right honourable friend, is long overdue. Yep. Back in April 2022, when a consultation had just started in January of that year, the then government identified issues. And I was slightly bemused that I consider my right honourable friend not to have covered that in her speech. But there were serious issues and limitations identified through that consultation. And so it was then a further over 2 years during which the previous government failed to act. And Madam Deputy Speaker, as we heard from my right honourable friend, Minister, this has proved very costly, as he illustrated in his speech. The past couple of years we have seen that cybersecurity is not just paramount to our everyday lives, it is crucial. It ensures food on our supermarket shelves. It's the lights staying on. It's critical to every corner of the UK. But now we have to move at pace, not just with this legislation, but I would urge us to go further. For if we are to protect ourselves from our adversaries, we need to develop a true whole-of-society approach to cybersecurity and start a national conversation on security at home. This legislation is clearly a first step, an important first step, a first chapter, if you will. But there must be many more written if we are going to seriously address our national security. And I mean here our social and economic security. Increasingly, this past decade, we have seen a blurring of war and peace with the emergence of hybrid warfare and the widening of the grey zone. We are living in a cyber no man's land where states or state-sponsored actors, proxies, can act with relative ease and impunity, leaving the world a more dangerous place. And it is the cyber realm that is and will remain a key battleground. And it is one we must seize. We, the United Kingdom, need to wake up to this, and I mean every one of us, particularly with the development of AI and quantum computing and the extraordinary threats that will come from those developments. Because when it comes to being the target of these cyber attacks, the United Kingdom, Madam Deputy Speaker, now ranks third of all nations globally. In 2024 alone, the National Cybersecurity Centre, the NCSC, handled an average of 4 major serious attacks every week. These are the really serious attacks. And the impact on the economy is staggering. In that same year, it cost the British economy £15 billion, or 0.5% of GDP. And when you're trying to increase GDP by 1% or 2%, whatever, you think that that hit of 0.5%, how significant that is. Now, while 43% of businesses have reported having any kind of security breach or attack in the last 12 months, for medium and large businesses, this figure rises to 67 and 74%. Every attack inflicts more pain on the United Kingdom PLC, and that means lower economic growth and lower tax receipts to fund our public services. And the effects, as we heard earlier, ripple through our whole society. We were talking about Jaguar Land Rover just then, and the attack this summer. Of course, it cost the company an estimated £500 million, affected over 5,000 businesses and risked thousands of jobs, with many of those employees based in my constituency of Warwick and Leamington. So the impact is significant right across. It would be cafes, restaurants, pubs, shops, all these being affected by the downturn that was immediately led with the shutdown of the factories. Now, there was the attack also on Collins Aerospace that was referenced or alluded to earlier that crippled Heathrow Airport, and I think Stansted was affected, but less so, that scuppered thousands of hard-earned family holidays in autumn of last year, and the ramifications for the travel sector were significant. Of course, it's not just businesses. We've seen the attacks on councils, as we've heard, and charities. Even the British Library, which was knocked out 2 years ago, which has meant that so much of our research potential in this country has been impacted across our higher education university institutions, really significantly affecting the UK. The Electoral Commission got knocked out by an attack by Chinese state-sponsored actors. And there have been so many others. Even our NHS is not safe. As my right honourable friend mentioned about the attack on Synovis. But then last year, over 11,000 NHS appointments were lost due to cyber attacks. The attack in June 2024 on London hospitals by the Russian group Kiln saw 1,100 cancer treatments delayed, 2,000 outpatient appointments cancelled, and more than 1,000 operations postponed, and tragically, the death of a patient. The message from across our international partners and the UK security services is clear, and I'll give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. With regard to the attack on the NHS, prior to being elected to this place, I worked for 10 years in health and social care. And so I witnessed that attack taking place. And nothing could be a more stark demonstration of the impact on productivity that cyber attacks have on our country and our society. There was a meeting of senior, at the time, CCG and other health trust executives in Hertfordshire. And one by one, they were forced to leave the room, like lights blinking out, as the impact of the attack became clear. So does he agree with me that this bill is essential in order that our legislation keeps up to date with the new methods of attack that bad actors are using on our state and infrastructure as online technology evolves?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention and his lived experience, really, through this. I can only relate to having spoken to organisations through the Business and Trade Select Committee, but also in my role on the Committee for National Security Strategy, where hearing from those organisations that have been impacted, how paralysing it is, the immediate aftermath of such an attack, and how it challenges an organisation. So these kind of red team, blue team scenarios are crucial that they get played out. But when it's actually happening and you are facing an entire shutdown of your systems, it is really very difficult to navigate. But this is where many have talked about the change of culture that is needed. We do need to embrace this urgently, and as he says, that experience in the NHS was good example. But these attacks, Madam Deputy Speaker, are the new normal, and we must be better prepared. In September 2024, led by both the FBI and the NSA, the United Kingdom, Germany, Estonia, Canada, and a plethora of other allies released their clearest articulation of the threat posed by Russia and Putin in particular. They said, and I quote, "Russia are responsible for computer network operations against global targets for the purposes of espionage, sabotage, and reputational harm since at least 2020. And the NCSC annual review in 2024 called the landscape diffuse and dangerous, while the 2025 review could not have been clearer. It's time to act, they said, in the defining text on the front cover. Richard Horn, head of the NCSC, said, and I quote, "Empty shelves and stored production lines are a stark reminder that cyber attacks no longer just affect computers and data, but real businesses, real products, and real lives. The recent cyber attacks must act as a wake-up call." And just last week, Andrew Bailey, Governor of the Bank of England, said cyber attacks were one of the biggest threats to UK financial stability and stressed the critically important need for collaborative defence. The reality should be clear to everyone here. The front line is everywhere. It's our phone, it's at our desk, it's our businesses, it's our infrastructure, it's even here at the heart of our democracy. And such a threat requires a whole of society response. Of course, we are not the first to have been targeted. Back in 2007, what's that, 18 years ago, Russia launched a determined cyber attack on Estonia. It was a damaging and debilitating to their society and economy. The cyber attack was a call to action for Estonia, and they responded at pace. It brought about cultural change, which has been talked about in the chamber in the opening remarks. They overhauled their legal, political, and strategic framework, even looking at their education, and adopted a whole-of-society approach to cybersecurity and developed a serious public-private partnership to counter the threats posed by Russia. Now, no doubt the Minister will have looked at this case in more detail to understand what learnings could be applied here and to our cybersecurity strategy more widely to ensure whole-of-society resilience. Because the reality, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that cyber attacks target the weakest link. And so it was welcome to hear my right honourable friend talk about the initiatives with the FTSE 350 companies and some of the smaller businesses and how they should be engaging with these threats. Madam Deputy Speaker, it cannot be acceptable that the most popular password in the United Kingdom is, and I quote, password. It is ridiculous. Every one of us must act as guardian against our cyber adversaries. Turning to the bill itself, there are valuable and desperately needed provisions laid out. The extended scope of the bill is hugely welcome, bringing in data centres, large load controllers and managed service providers under the NIS regulations protects more of the economy from cyber attacks. And I'm particularly pleased to see the inclusion of MSPs, given the vulnerabilities that organisations often face from external IT suppliers or their supply base. The amendments to the regulatory framework are a positive step forward. Improving the reporting of incidents will allow the government to respond at pace and be agile to the evolving threats and shared vulnerabilities. That said, during the last Parliament, the Joint Committee of National Security Strategy, which I now chair, called for one cross-sector cyber regulator. And I would echo those calls, as I believe it will enable far greater regulation and enforcement. Finally, the improved resilience and security enabled through additional powers granted to the Secretary of State are crucial to enable the government to act quickly in real times of crisis. Now, despite all the positive aspects of the bill, and I congratulate ministers after the years of dithering by its predecessor government, it does leave large parts of the economy outside its scope. As I've mentioned already, how can we incorporate a whole-of-society approach to cybersecurity like that of Estonia? There will be many different levers for the government to pull. Now, this bill, I believe, is just one part, and I trust that others will follow swiftly. It's worth noting that the EU's NIS2 directive is broadly parallel to the bill before us. However, the EU does go further on cyber resilience, having added sectors such as manufacturing, food distribution, and wastewater. Now, having witnessed such devastating attacks in these sectors this past year, I would urge us to act swiftly with further legislation to address these areas. Madam Deputy Speaker, in summary, I would just restate I absolutely welcome the bill, and that the three key pillars of the legislation, the expanded scope, improving regulation and strengthening resilience, are hugely welcome, as is the importance of experience, reporting and sharing by victims. The cyber attacks we've suffered this past year must be our inflection point, our call to action. Like Estonia's in 2007, we have an opportunity to reinvigorate our cyber defences and ensure the whole of society is resilient. And now, the Shadow Minister mentioned about the digital ID. What I would gently say is that the opportunity was seized upon by Estonia at that time. They since introduced digital ID. It is secure, as it is in Denmark. They looked at the opportunity presented by that challenge, that attack that they faced, and those systems do work. It's been demonstrated by both those countries. Now, as the NCS annual review rightly asserts, the UK's cyber security is a shared responsibility where everyone needs to play a part. As parliamentarians, we have a duty to raise the salience of this and bring about a national conversation to ensure everyone plays their part. Finally, may I gently encourage the Minister to go further and faster and to look at the broader cyber landscape as Estonia did and the EU is doing with its NIS2 legislation, and to look to introduce legislation to cover food production and distribution, manufacturing and other critical sectors. But as I say, this bill is an important first step in that development, and I look forward to working constructively with the Minister to ensure that the UK and its citizens are secure and resilient to any future cyber attacks.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Victoria Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and a happy new year to yourself and everyone else in the chamber. It is a pleasure to finally address the long-awaited Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill. And indeed, as has been mentioned today, the importance of this is significant. The National Cybersecurity Centre reported that nationally significant cyber incidents have more than doubled since the year before. This past year's surge in cyber attacks, from supply chains to hospitals to critical infrastructure, has made one fact: societal security without cyber security. 14.7 billion. That's what the UK economy annually. And behind that are attacks on companies like Jaguar Land Rover, M&S, and more importantly, the impact on the real economy, thousands of jobs, businesses hanging in the balance, and it's impacting our public services and our private data. And as the Minister mentioned this morning, the NHS Synovis ransomware attack resulted in more than 11,000 postponed appointments and procedures, and has even been linked to one patient's death, which is attributed to that delay. This matters. We must do all that we can to upgrade protection on our security because jobs, economy and lives depend on it. And our economy, imagine it, if you will, as a house, is under attack. The Liberal Democrats welcome the bill's intent to upgrade our home security. The addition of data centres, managed service providers and large load controllers mean we're building stronger fences and that companies who have a master key to all of our doors have stronger security, while the wiring has also been upgraded and the alarm system is getting an upgrade with increased incident reporting. But the bill is leaving the back doors wide open by leaving out key sectors. Our alarm system isn't sure when it's supposed to ring, and we've got the companies who have the keys to our doors using our house, asking for simplicity and clarity and support so that they can do their job properly. While no single cybersecurity legislation can act as a silver bullet, these are the gaps that we must address. By failing to take the whole economy approach, which was mentioned by the Honourable Member, we're leaving out public sector and economically significant retail sectors like retail and manufacturing. And indeed, this bill therefore leaves the back doors wide open. The bill's stated aims are to protect the organisations so essential that their disruption would affect our daily lives. Yet the government apparently doesn't consider its own public services, local authorities, essential enough for protection. The £10 million Red Council incident proves voluntary schemes are failing local authorities. But after this bill passes, government institutions and councils will still lack statutory protections and the ring-fence funding. And this is all while council budgets are getting tighter. I have no doubt that members of the public whose data in the form of electoral rolls or social care records sit in these systems would object to their inclusion. But we're also talking about, as has been mentioned, a potential digital ID system, a mandatory ID system for the whole of this country, which the government have already mentioned would be built by a homemade technology. Where will the cyber protection be in that? What's more, leaving out sectors like retail and manufacturing mean that JLS and M&S cyber attacks remain out of scope. These are significant sectors, major employers, major parts of our supply chains, and handle significant amounts of personal data. As it stands, this bill marks a failure of ambition. The government claimed in response to a letter that we sent on the topic that they do not need to wait or rely on legislation to implement cyber security requirements within the public sector, and will instead use the government action plan to ensure the very same requirements written in this bill will be applied to the public sector. My question, Madam Deputy Speaker, is why do we have to have this two-tiered approach? Why leave out an economically and socially significant sector such as the public sector? So does the Minister agree that we need mandatory cyber security standards for these absent sectors of our society, governance and economy? If we're serious about national resilience, about protecting citizens' data, about aligning with European partners, then let us vote on it here in this chamber with full transparency and accountability in the primary legislation. A further critical gap in this bill is the failure to embed security by design, to ensure, and also a lack of clear accountability where this should be board-led, to ensure that each lock, each door, each window of our house is built securely. In 2019, the NCSC published design principles. Last October, the government itself launched a Secure by Design framework as core to its cyber security standard, yet this bill not only excludes government from critical national infrastructure, it abandons this key principle, failing to mention by design. This matters especially given the research by ISC2 suggesting that skills shortages are the #1 challenge for complying with cyber regulation in the UK, with 88% of respondents experiencing at least one cybersecurity breach as a result of skills shortages. This is also a missed opportunity for our economy and our cybersecurity sector. Prioritising security by design would alternatively provide the baseline protection our critical infrastructure desperately needs. So what considerations do the government have to ensure this security by design? An effective regulation doesn't just mean future-proofing. It must be workable. While we welcome the expanded incident reporting, the current definition risks creating significant regulatory burden, over-reporting that will overwhelm rather than strengthen our cybersecurity systems. Those coming to upgrade our security are not being given the clear directions. The current definition of reportable incident is so broad that it could even link to every phishing email. So how will the NCSC feasibly manage this administrative burden when the alarm may be ringing non-stop? Other critical terms lack clarity for the industry, including managed service provider and the criteria for digital critical suppliers, as highlighted by Tech UK and others. These aren't just technical details to be ironed out later. They're the difference between a bill that works and one that doesn't, and the industry needs clarity on how to comply. So will the Minister work with us in industry to tighten these definitions so it's workable? Will the Minister consider the best way to ensure simplicity and effectiveness for incident reporting? Furthermore, what is being done to support homegrown cybersecurity in the UK? What is being done to defend from hostile foreign interference? With one of the latest defence contracts going to Palantir, what is being done to support UK tech? Would the government support a digital sovereign strategy as highlighted by the Open Rights Group? This is yet another missed opportunity to support our domestic tech sector at a time when we should be building UK cybersecurity capabilities and creating high-skilled jobs here at home. How can we claim to be serious about national resilience when the very infrastructure protecting our critical systems could be entirely outsourced abroad? And supporting UK tech and businesses isn't just about the providers in this bill. It's about the thousands of SMEs who form the backbone of our economy. For those few SMEs and startups who are directly affected by this bill, it creates a red glittery thicket of overlapping rules, different timelines and multiple bodies. Cybersecurity is complicated, and for this legislation to work, it must be simple and easily implementable for UK SMEs. So what support will there be for those SMEs and startups that are impacted? Furthermore, it would be remiss not to mention the wider cybercrime landscape. SMEs make up 99.8% of UK businesses and are often the most vulnerable link in cyber supply chains. The NCC Group confirms manufacturing, retail and leisure, dominated by SMEs, were the most targeted for ransomware in 2024. This is why the Liberal Democrats are calling on the government to establish a digital safety net for SMEs, a nationwide first responder service that provides free point-of-use support to small businesses that have been victims of a cyber attack. Australia is already doing this, providing person-to-person support during and after attacks. So if Australia can do that, why can't we? And on top of this, Madam Deputy Speaker, the biggest threat is actually fraud and costs the economy hundreds of billions a year. 2/3 of all fraud begins online, and many through social media companies with no liability, which is why the Liberal Democrats are calling for social media platforms to be made financially viable for fraud on their sites, creating a clear line of accountability for criminal activity. More than that, fraud is a cybersecurity issue. It exploits weak systems and inadequate protections. Families lose life savings, elderly people fall victim to sophisticated phishing, small businesses shut down. While we have the cybersecurity bill that protects infrastructure while leaving the back door open, it also ignores the billions of savings lost and livelihoods amended due to online fraud the government must address in its long-awaited fraud strategy. We cannot protect systems but it's not the finish line. The cyber threat is real, evolving, but we must ensure that we're not leaving the back door open, that we're future-proofing our security. We owe it to our businesses, families and our national security to get this right. Thank you.
Yeah. Dame Chiomwara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and a Happy New Year to you and to all in the House and to the staff as well. And it is appropriate that we begin 2026 by talking about an issue in this House which is of grave importance to all our constituents, but which is not talked about enough here or for that matter across the country. And that is of course cyber security. At the start of this century, indeed this millennium, only a quarter of the UK and 6% of the world were online. Today, almost 98% of the UK and 68% of the world use the internet. According to Ofcom, we each spend between 3 and 6 hours online per day. depending on our age and interests, and for many, perhaps too many, life is lived online. And even when you're not online, the infrastructure of your life is. Whether you use online banking or not, your bank account details will be stored in some cloud somewhere. The same is true of your health records, your electricity bills, your child's school records, the safety sensors on our nuclear power plants, your Christmas Marks and Spencer's order, your last Uber ride. The Prime Minister said that national security is the first responsibility of any government. I hope the House can all agree that government must ensure the security of the British people as we go about our increasingly online lives, and that previous governments have not taken this issue seriously enough or done enough to protect our citizens. So that's why, as chair of the Science, Innovation and Technology Select Committee and a self-confessed tech evangelist, I welcome this legislation. And I'm pleased to see other members of the Select Committee here. The committee has not examined cybersecurity in detail specifically, but we have expressed significant concerns with regard to public sector data management, for example, after the Afghan data breach came to light. Currently, as we have heard, the UK's only cost-cutting cybersecurity legislation is that inherited from the European Union. Since Brexit, the European Union has updated these regulations, leaving the UK working under an outdated framework. Meanwhile, nationally significant cyber incidents, as measured by the National Cybersecurity Centre, more than doubled last year. The NCSC also warns that AI will almost certainly increase both the scale and impact of attacks. And let us remember that when everyone can code, thanks to AI, everyone can hack. And we need to respond to that, because these attacks threaten not only our national security, but our economy. And in November, the Bank of England cited for the first time a major cyber attack, that on Jaguar Land Rover, as a factor in its decision to hold interest rates. The JLR breach is estimated to have cost the economy, almost £2 billion. So that's why I welcome this bill, which seeks to expand the scope to new sectors, making regulators more effective and grant the government additional powers to respond to the ever-evolving threat landscape. However, I must be clear, there is more to be done. My main concerns relate to the scope of the legislation. So, as we have heard, the bill brings data centres, large load controllers and managed service providers in scope of regulations, which is right, and grants competent authorities the power to designate critical suppliers who are vital to the services provided. Yet, as we have heard, some of our most economically significant sectors remain outside of its core obligations. Retail is the UK's largest private sector employer, handles huge volumes of sensitive customer data, runs complex supply chains, relies on legacy IT systems often, making it a prime target for cyber criminals. Yet it is outside the scope of the bill. So the legislation would not have done anything to prevent the attacks on Marks and Spencer's, the Co-op or Jaguar Land Rover, which impacted our constituents so much. So now I welcome the government's plan to promote the new cyber governance code of practice to improve preparedness in sectors like retail. But even after high-profile breaches, cybersecurity is still not prioritised at board level. And a recent report by the Information Systems Audit and Control Association, IASCA, shows only 56% of company boards take cybersecurity seriously enough, and that is after JLR. So the Minister, in his excellent speech, did say that it was up to private sector companies to manage their own cybersecurity. I agree with that, but I wonder if you'd address how the government will assess that that is actually happening, and what the government will do if there is evidence that companies are not managing their cybersecurity effectively, and that our citizens are not adequately protected as a result. So without a way to monitor and enforce government standards, large parts of our economy remain exposed. IESCA recommends a statutory review of the uptake and effectiveness of the Cyber Governance Code, powers for regulators to mandate periodic external resilience assessments, including penetration testing and scenario-based exercises, as well as requiring organisations to appoint an accountable individual who meets defined competency standards. Now, government departments, local administrations and public bodies, such as the BBC, are also outside the scope. So the bill does nothing to address long-standing weaknesses in public sector data management, which have been highlighted by my select committee. Now, as the National Audit Office declared last year, the cyber threat to the UK government is severe and advancing quickly. We had the cyber attack on the FCDO in October, which is a clear example of how rapidly these attacks are escalating. We need greater rigour to prevent future attacks and build the public trust that is needed for the implementation of programmes such as Digital ID and other digital transformation projects. Now, I've not been able to study in any detail the action plan which the government published this morning, but I will look for clear measures of success when it comes to implementing the government's action plan and ways in which cultural change, which we have spoken about in this debate, which is needed within the public sector as well as the private sector, will be achieved. And the Secretary of State recently told my committee that the government would, and I quote, assess the improvements the cybersecurity bill brings to the UK cyber defences through post-implementation reviews, regular engagement with NIS regulators and industry, and monitoring the incidence and costs of any future cyber attacks. So I would welcome the Minister's clarifying where these commitments reflect the statutory requirements within the bill, clauses 20 to 22, or the additional policy commitments and how they will be funded. Finally, small businesses. So the bill rightly focuses on critical national infrastructure, but as we all know, you're only as secure as your weakest link, and the supply chains for our critical national infrastructure involve many small businesses who may or may not be within the scope of this bill, depending on whether and how and whether they are designated as such. Can the Minister say how quickly he envisages businesses knowing whether they have been designated as critical suppliers? I support the bill's proposals for mandatory cyber incident reporting. I recognise the value of government collecting and publishing data on ransomware and other attacks. But I share concerns raised by the ABI and other speakers about the feasibility of small businesses meeting the proposed two-stage reporting, particularly submitting full reports to regulators and the NCSC within 72 hours. We have seen that Cyber Essentials take-up, so the programme to help businesses, and particularly small businesses, achieve the cyber security they need. Cyber Essentials take-up is low amongst businesses. As I said, only 33,000 in 2024. Cyber insurance take-up is also low amongst small businesses, so leaving them vulnerable both in terms of skills and protection. Can the Minister say a little bit about plans to address this? If this bill is to succeed, implementation must be done with industry, not to industry, so I echo Tech UK's calls for clearer guidance on information sharing and additional support to help small businesses meet compliance costs. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope in his closing the Minister can address the following points specifically. Will the government consider extending the bill to economically significant businesses outside its current scope and empowering regulators to mandate stronger cyber governance and resilience assessments? Will the government consider including direct measures to strengthen cybersecurity and resilience in public administrations, including local authorities and government departments? Will the government clarify whether the post-implementation reviews, monitoring of cyber incidents and engagements with regulators and industries she has outlined to my committee reflect the existing statutory requirements within the bill? Will the Minister ensure that the new cyber incident reporting and information sharing requirements are implemented in a practical and proportionate way for small businesses? Will they take steps to support cyber insurance take-up? And finally, will they ensure there is clear guidance on information sharing requirements and provide additional support to help businesses meet compliance costs? Madam Deputy Speaker, we need to talk more about cyber and cyber security, and I have not touched on some of the national security implications, which the Minister and my honourable friend, the member for Warwick and Leamington, described very well in his speech. But this is clear. This is an issue which is only going to get more important, both from a national security, an economic security, and a personal safety and security perspective. Now, if we can get the implementation of this bill right, extending it as necessary, working with industry, supporting smaller businesses, supporting public trust and public security, then I hope we can build a nation that is not just cyber secure today, but prepared for the many challenges which lie ahead.
Sir Oliver Dowden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Lady for Honourable Member for Newcastle upon Tyne, who has brought tremendous expertise to this debate. In my previous role overseeing national resilience and cross-government coordination of national security threats, cybersecurity was probably the one area that caused me the greatest number of sleepless nights. There's been a lot of talk in recent months and years about the increased need to defend the realm and the steps that need to be taken to address the defence of the realm. We all know from past experience that the first line of attack of any attack on the defence of the realm is highly likely to be through cyber attacks. And indeed, in a completely different context, we only need to look at the public comments of the President of the United States a couple of days ago in terms of the first steps that the United States took in its intervention in Venezuela. He talked about capabilities that the United States had to knock out power supply there. And if we look at our adversaries, particularly Russia, North Korea, and Iran, we can see that they are actively inculcating and encouraging environments where cyber attacks can be planned and take place, whether that's explicitly private sector individuals or with the connivance of the state. A deliberate grey zone is created there with the desire to increase knowledge of the risks to cyber in the United Kingdom and our allies, and to carry out penetrative attacks to that effect. And we are likely to see this grey zone warfare continue to increase as a result of actions that we see in Ukraine and elsewhere. And we just have to look at our own experience of this. If one looks at what happened after the JLR attack, and many honourable members have made this point, how the initial attack rapidly cascaded and affected many others in the supply chain, and certainly from the government's own research and testing of this, and again it's in the public domain, that one rapidly sees that one cyber attack can cascade into other areas. So, for example, when we tested the impact of a cyber attack on our electricity system, that rapidly cascades into our water system, which is dependent on electricity. Clearly, it also rapidly cascades into our transport system. So before long, a small cyber attack becomes a very, very large cyber attack. And in common with most other, in fact all other advanced countries, the United Kingdom is highly exposed to cyber attacks, a point that I made repeatedly from the dispatch box in this House. I do welcome that the steps that the Minister I would just like to gently caution against what the Minister said, and I legislation will fix the cybersecurity problem. It won't fix the cybersecurity problem. No single piece of legislation is ever going to fix a cybersecurity problem, nor is this a question of good guys and bad guys. The last government did nothing, this government's doing nothing. Each government has to a fresh look at the challenges of cybersecurity and take necessary and proportionate steps to address the risks of cybersecurity. So in that context, I just wanted to make a few... Yes, I will give way to the honourable member.
I thank the Right Honourable Member for giving way. Given his extensive experience, it's very interesting to hear what he says. If he had his time again, and this is not to criticise the previous government, but if in the here and now, does he think that this area needs an absolute focus from across government, but from across society, because it is such a crucial part of our defence?
Yes, I totally agree with him. And indeed, that is what the National Cybersecurity Centre, working in conjunction with the last government, and I believe, and I know, continuing under the current government, that's why the National Cybersecurity Centre set out the whole of government approach. It can't just be the actions of individual government ministers or individual actors in the private sector. The whole of government needs to act together. In terms of further steps we could and should have taken, this goes to the intervention I made on the minister. I do think that more pressure needs to be brought to bear on ministers in terms of their accountability for cyber security. And I fear that the risk, if we don't put this into primary legislation, it's something that can slip further and further down ministers' in trays, whilst ministers have a desire to address it. Other more pressing, immediate problems distract their attention. So some constructive suggestions about things that could be improved in respect of this proposed legislation. The first is this point about many of the powers being delegated to secondary legislation. I think that's it's essential that we have a framework piece of legislation and then we have the flexibility to allow secondary legislation to be brought forward to address challenges as they arise. I would, though, urge that ministers undertake a meaningful and mandatory consultation on any secondary legislation that comes forward so that businesses and others can contribute to it. I would also caution against ministers devolving and forgetting to regulators their duties in respect of cyber security. Too often I've seen this, that, and this is again with governments of both colours, that regulators are empowered to address
Thank you very much. If I could ask our witnesses to introduce themselves and then we'll go into questions. Perhaps we'll start with you, Mr. Roberts.
Good afternoon, Chief Constable Mark Roberts from Cheshire Constabulary, but I'm here in my role as MPCC Lead for Football Policing.
Good afternoon, Mike O'Hara, Assistant Chief Constable from the West Midlands, and I was the Gold Commander.
Good afternoon, Craig Guilford, Chief Constable of West Midlands Police.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mick Wilkinson, I'm a Chief Inspector with West Midlands Police, and I'm the head of the Force Football Unit.
Thank you very much. And to start our questioning, I'll call Paul Kohler.
Thank you. I'd like to return to the meeting between CW and the Dutch police on the 1st of October. I think it was the 1st of October. It's referred to as the 2nd of October in the peer review, but I think it was the 1st of October, that meeting, yeah. There was no contemporaneous minutes of that. Is that normal practice when interviewing witnesses, not to have minutes taken?
Sorry, did you say when interviewing witnesses?
Yes. Or listening to evidence? Is it normal practice to take minutes?
Sorry. Yeah, do you want to just come in there with that, because you were on the meeting?
So if I could just take a couple of moments, if that's okay, just to explain sort of my role within West Midlands Police and some of the operational experience that I drew upon in terms of the planning and the delivery of this policing operation. So I am one of West Midlands Police's silver and bronze public order commanders. I've been involved in football policing for the majority of my policing career, and I am part of the European Silver Cadre of police commanders policing both in the UK and indeed in Europe. I've planned and delivered numerous high-profile football fixtures, high-risk fixtures, but additionally to that, in terms of my sort of operational command, I am also the Force's National CT SECO lead and have regularly taken on the role of delivering party conference, and most recently was the security coordinator for the Commonwealth Games. So I just felt that it was important to share that with you in terms of my operational exposure and the roles and processes I go through in delivering those operations. With regards to the comments around meeting with the Dutch police, if I could just say that as a commander, and in terms of informing my decision making and making the best and most informed decision, I think it's really important to try and obtain information from as many different sources, diverse sources of information, to absolutely make sure that our decision making is the most well informed as it possibly can be.
My question, no minutes were taken at the time.
No, forgive me. So in terms of the question, no minutes were taken.
Why not? So
the conversation was between policing peers. So my conversation was with the Dutch Police Command, who were, as I say, trusted professional policing peers, speaking peer-to-peer to obtain their information, their experiences of delivering an operation of the scale that the fixture that we were going to deliver. I think that's regular. I've done that commonly when planning big operations, speaking to police commanders from other forces, both within the UK and across the world, to speak with other professional policing peers to get that honesty and candour from their experiences of delivering an operation.
And that makes sense, but did you record what was said soon afterwards?
So I made notes during my meeting with them, which were then transcribed and put into an email, which was submitted into the chain of command.
And we have the email before us now.
And you've got the email.
It's not dated. When was the email sent?
So the email was sent on the 9th of October.
That's a week later.
So
you made not contemporaneous notes, but notes soon afterwards, and this email is a version of those notes.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. It's referred to as the tipping point in the peer review. Do you agree that evidence was the tipping point in your decision to ban away fans?
So from the perspective of the operation, the evidence that I gave last time, absolutely, I thought with the way that the intelligence had built up, that my assessment was, certainly from looking at it objectively, that it was really important information, which actually influenced the bronze, the silver and the gold commander.
Why does it not appear in the community impact assessment? Why is no reference made to this incredibly important information in the community impact assessment?
If you want to take that? It's not normal practice to reference engagement with professionals, particularly.
No, not the engagement, but the actual information. All in the community impact assessment is more accurate information about what happened in the Amsterdam fixture. None of this information, this contentious information, which there is great doubts over, none of that appears in the community impact assessment. Why not? It was so important. Why wasn't it there?
So the community impact assessment is exactly that. It's about engagement and information exchange with community. The CIA has a different role.
I'm sorry to correct you, but it does cover, the community impact assessment does cover the Amsterdam match, what was said previously. It doesn't say this new information, which contradicts what you've recorded in the community impact assessment. You can't argue